A sudden jolt of awareness. Consciousness returns not in a familiar bed, but atop a galloping warhorse. The rider, clad in full armor, realizes with a start that when they came to, they were already mounted and charging forward. They pull back on the reins, their gaze sweeping over the unfamiliar cobblestone street. A question forms in their mind, a seed of disbelief and confusion. Wait, is this? The sight before them steals their breath. A grand castle looms over a town engulfed in flames and chaos. The scene is shockingly familiar, prompting a single, whispered acronym of recognition. Yoi, the name stands for Echoes of Eternity, a title known far and wide simply as Yoi. It is a medieval fantasy role-playing game of legendary status. Its grand story of light and darkness spans 2,000 years, a masterpiece still praised 3 years after its release. The game's depth is immense, with countless items and character classes, ensuring that even thousands of hours of gameplay are not enough to master everything. This burning town, it's a scene straight from Ioi's prologue, where the protagonist group rushes to aid a town under a monster attack. The memory is sharp, belonging to someone who played the game so much that mistaking its opening scene would be impossible. Yet, something is profoundly wrong. The realism is overwhelming. It's not just the visuals of the crumbling, burning buildings. The sounds of crackling fire, the distant screams. Everything feels terrifyingly real. A chilling thought pierces through the sensory overload. If this truly is the world of Ioi, then why are they seeing it from this specific perspective? This isn't the view of the game's protagonist. Looking down, they see only the armored neck of their steed. There is no one in front of them, no hero leading the charge. The horrifying realization begins to dawn. It's almost as if they are. A soldier calls out, shattering the internal spiral. Captain, your orders. The armored rider turns, their eyes wide with shock. This blonde beauty, they recognize her. An identity floods their mind. Natalya Norfolk, vice captain of the Holy Empire of Eterna's 3rd Special Forces Unit. A character they've seen countless times in the game. The soldier, seeing their captain's stunned silence, grows frantic. See, Captain? Who? Pull yourself together. Who else could it be but you? The shock gave way to utter confusion. This couldn't be happening. He frantically questioned what was going on, and more importantly, why he was now in the body of a man named Silva. He desperately tried to think, to piece together how any of this could have happened. Then, a memory surfaced. He recalled walking home after stocking up on energy drinks at a convenience store to start a new game route. He saw a woman about to be hit by a truck and instinctively jumped to protect her, taking the impact himself. The realization struck him. He had died in that accident and been reincarnated. But if so, he wondered why he had ended up as Silva of all people, instead of the game's protagonist. He knew the character well. Silva Pierce, captain of the Holy Empire of Eternia's 3rd Special Forces Unit, renowned as the strongest knight in the kingdom. At the start of the story, he was an excellent character on paper, possessing cheat-tier stats and numerous powerful skills. But there was one huge problem that ruined everything. His thought was cut short by an urgent cry from one of his soldiers, demanding orders. Snapping back to the present, he focused his mind. First, he needed to clear this prologue. He ordered everyone to eliminate the monsters in town and protect the survivors, declaring that he would take down the source of the attack himself. His troops acknowledged the command with a unified cry. May the silver lance bless us, before dispersing. He accepted his new reality. This was his job now. According to the game's plot, the current event involved the protagonist rescuing the heroine. Meanwhile, his own task was to eliminate the boss behind the attack. As if summoned by his thoughts, 2 large, screeching avian monsters descended upon the town square. He spurred his horse forward without thinking. He had just been a gamer living peacefully in a real world, but now, facing the monstrous beasts, he knew he had no other choice but to fight. He struck the creature with overwhelming force, a simple swing of his weapon obliterating it completely. A thought flashed through his mind. A stunning realization of the immense power he now wielded. This incredible strength wasn't even a special skill. It was a mere basic attack. He recalled the game's mechanics. While other characters began at level 10, the character of Silva Pierce started at a staggering level 60. Against the low-level monsters swarming the prologue, he was in a completely different league. Because of this vast disparity in power, he knew with certainty that the lesser creatures stood no chance against him. His attention turned to the true source of the invasion, a massive dimensional fault, a rift tearing through space and spewing forth monsters. He knew this was the Special Forces' top priority. Destroying it would mean the end of the prologue, but seeing it in such vivid detail was far more unsettling than on any screen. He began searching for the key to its destruction, his eyes scanning the chaos until he finally spotted his target. He knew the rule. To close a rift, one must defeat its guardian, the boss monster. Taking that creature down would fulfill his role in this opening chapter of the story. Despite facing a beast several times his size, he felt no fear. A strange confidence filled him. He was Silva now, inhabiting a body and mind seasoned by countless battles. More than that, as a player, he possessed the ultimate knowledge. He knew precisely how powerful this character truly was. As the beast let out a deafening roar, he met it head-on, his grin widening with exhilaration as his weapon slammed into its hardened hide. He unleashed a named technique, the Divine Piercing Strike, a devastating blow that tore through the monster's defenses. The strike found its mark. With a final shudder, The massive beast collapsed to the ground, defeated. He stood over it, his task complete. He stood firm on the fractured ground, the battle won, but his mind already on a far greater challenge. There was still one huge problem he had to deal with. That problem was his own unchangeable fate. According to the game's original story, at the climax of Chapter 1, the character Silva Pierce is destined to die. He sacrifices himself to allow the protagonist to escape collapsing ruins, an unavoidable death event that no player had ever found a way to prevent. Though dedicated fans had petitioned for a DLC survival route, their pleas went unanswered. Ultimately, everyone accepted Silva's fate. He would never make it to Chapter 2, but now that he had become Silva, he refused to accept that. Having already died once in the real world, he was not about to die again here. As this resolve hardened, a subordinate with glasses rushed to his side, asking with concern if the captain was all right. He looked up, his focus entirely on the mission's conclusion. He announced that the rift had been closed and demanded to know the situation on their end. Natalya and Folk reported back immediately. The monsters in the town were eliminated, and they were guiding survivors to safety. She praised him, saying his handling of the rift alone was incredible. Another soldier added that the protagonist was safe as well, much to the relief of the nearby civilians. Meanwhile, in another place entirely, the player now inhabiting Silva's body sat slumped at a desk. He was in the 3rd Special Forces Unit headquarters in the royal capital Aurora, but felt utterly lost, wondering what he was supposed to do. He stared at a translucent interface before him. Despite how realistic everything else was, this part still felt like a game. He grimaced, realizing it had to be the character of Silva he had taken over. The screen displayed Silva's statistics: Strength 281, Endurance 270. These were completely broken, cheat-tier stats for this early stage. The typical fate of a powerful character introduced early in a game. He leaned back, contemplating the truth. Right now, as Silva Pierce, he might be among the world's strongest, but he knew that facing his scripted death event alone was simply impossible. He leaned back, a wry thought crossing his mind. Should he just run away from it all? But that path was impossible. According to the game's unchangeable laws, if he were to flee, either the protagonist or the heroine would die at the end of the first chapter, leading to the world's doom. He gripped his hair in frustration. The situation felt completely unwinnable, with only 1 month left on the clock. As he stewed in his thoughts, a voice from the doorway interrupted him, politely asking for a moment. He looked up to see Natalya. She saluted crisply, stating she had come to report on the follow-up procedure from their last mission. She began with the unidentified girl rescued by the Tangent Unit, and he recognized this moment as a pivotal point in the original story. His mind raced, recalling the plot. The protagonist was actually the main heroine, Leia. She would soon awaken and escape the barracks, pursued by the sub-hero, Kyle, and the sub-heroine, Mia. According to the script, Silva himself wasn't supposed to appear again until the final event. All he had to do was wait. As Natalya concluded her report, asking if he had any concerns, he jolted back to the present. He couldn't just follow the script. He needed a plan. He dismissed her, stating there was nothing in particular and that she had done good work. Natalya acknowledged his words and turned to leave. Watching her depart, a new thought sparked in his mind. Even if Silva alone wasn't enough to change his fate, maybe there was another way. Wait a minute, he called out suddenly. She stopped at the door, turning back towards his desk. Yes? She asked, her expression questioning. Did you think of something? Natalya stood at attention, ready. If it's something important, please don't hesitate to tell me. He met her gaze, his own expression serious. It's important, he confirmed, then paused. Actually, it's not an order. I have a favor to ask of you. Leaning forward with a sharp, intense grin, he made his shocking request. Take off your clothes. Natalya could only stare back, her mind blank with disbelief, uttering a single, confused huh. She stares in stunned silence, her eyes swirling with disbelief. Sweat beads on her face as she asks her captain to repeat his utterly incomprehensible command, to take off her clothes. Her initial shock gives way to a rigid sense of duty. Though she questions the necessity of removing her clothes, she affirms that if it is for the unit, she is prepared to obey. Silva acknowledges her point, agreeing to explain his reasoning step by step. He begins by stating that, in all honesty, he has always thought she would be better suited for a different role. Natalya, still confused, asks what a new role could possibly have to do with her undressing. His explanation is blunt and shocking. Her new role is to be a dancer. The word hangs in the air, and Natalya can only repeat it in stunned disbelief. He elaborates, acknowledging that she has done well leading the unit as a knight. But from now on, he declares she will shine as a dancer. The World's Chronicles note that the dancer is one of the classes that exist in the realm of Io. This class is a support-type shaman, utilizing dances and prayers to channel nature's power into allies. While most skills require MP, which is tied to the spirit stat, the dancer class consumes HP instead. For Natalya, whose spirit stat is the lowest of all, but whose vitality is excellent, this class is a perfect fit, compensating for her greatest weakness. She stares back at him, her face a mask of horror and confusion. She asks if this is some kind of joke, but his voice is firm as he insists he is serious. Her expression hardens into one of painful understanding. She asks if this means she is no longer needed as a knight. Before he can clarify, she cuts him off, stating that if it is the captain's will, she will obey, and that he should have just said so directly. Silva begins to protest, realizing she is gravely misunderstood. But she whirls on him, her voice breaking with anguish. She cries out that she admired him, that she wanted to be like him, and that was why she followed him. If he doesn't need her anymore, she declares with finality, then she has no reason to live and will take her own life right then and there. She screams for him to let her go, threatening to go outside and die if she is truly useless. Silva, stunned, realizes his critical oversight. Her incredibly low spirit stat makes her one of the most mentally unstable individuals he knows. She challenges him, asking if he's telling her to throw away her sword and flaunt her body because she can't meet his expectations as a knight. Silva vehemently denies it, shouting that no one called her useless. He insists he's asking because they need her strength, swearing an oath on the Silver Lance. The name gives her pause. The Silver Lance is the emblem of their unit. To swear upon it is a ritual more binding than any contract, a call that inspires the entire unit to charge in a battle with unwavering resolve. It is, in effect, a form of brainwashing. Having made such a solemn vow, he pleads with her again. He acknowledges how much she cherishes the lance and apologizes, but insists he is asking this for the unit's sake. Natalya, now calmer, concedes that becoming a dancer is a bit much, as she's never trained for it. Silva reassures her, guaranteeing she has the talent and asking her to trust his judgment. His intense gaze meets hers, and after a moment of consideration, she relents. She understands. With her agreement secured, Silva immediately presents her with a new outfit. Natalya accepts the role as his order, but stares at the clothing in disbelief. He seems not to notice, stating that since she agreed, there shouldn't be a problem. She holds the outfit, expressing her doubts. She wonders if it will suit her, admitting she has never considered herself to be very feminine. Silva dismisses her concerns entirely, bluntly telling her it will look good because she has an incredibly sexy body. He guarantees it will look good on her. Setting aside the unit's needs, she asks what he, as her captain, personally thinks. His demeanor shifts instantly to one of manic excitement. Leaning in close, he declares with a wide grin that he wants to see it. A short while later, her voice comes from the doorway. She apologizes for the wait as Silva turns, his expression surprised. She stands before him, having changed as ordered. Now clad in a revealing, flower-adorned dancer's outfit, she looks at him with uncertainty and asks if her new appearance is acceptable. As she stood before him, a wide, triumphant grin spread across Silva's face. He declared her appearance to be perfect, confirming that this was yet another reason he had insisted she become a dancer. He knew from experience that a character's seriousness was linked to an embarrassment coefficient, which could boost their support skills. For someone as earnest as Natalya, the effect was astounding, multiplying her stats by 1.5. Furthermore, her unique skill would now be treated as a dancer ability, making the class change even more potent. His optimization wasn't finished. He continued through the barracks, using his extensive knowledge to reassign roles for maximum efficiency. He instructed one surprised soldier to become a sorcerer, keeping a mental tally of his progress. Only 2 more to go. He slid open a door to find the last 2. A memory surfaced. In his past life, he had played this very game to death. Before him stood Kyle Transient, the game's original protagonist, and Mia Hawkeye, its supporting heroine. That deep knowledge was his greatest weapon. He had even conquered the game's highest difficulty hardcore racing event, a feat that proved the immense advantages of inhabiting the role of Silva Pierce. With such experience, he was certain there was no way he would fail and die in this world. Fueled by this conviction, his expression hardened. He vowed to himself that he would struggle until the very end. Inside a sparsely furnished room, a young man with spiky, light-colored hair enters, announcing his presence. He finds another young man, Kyle, standing in surprise, while a girl, Mia, rests in a bed. The newcomer greets them, telling Kyle to remain seated as he must be tired. His gaze shifts to the girl in the bed as he asks if the survivor has woken up yet. He observes Mia, noting that she doesn't appear to have any major injuries, so it would be expected for her to be awake by now. He adds that the doctors found nothing wrong and she doesn't seem to be suffering. He concludes with some certainty that she will wake up eventually. His expression hardens, his eyes narrowing with grim understanding. He thinks to himself that, of course, he is also aware of this young man's true identity. His internal monologue lays out a hidden history. The girl is Raya Eternia, descendant of the founding family of the Holy Kingdom of Eternia. She is also the reincarnation of the sage who sealed away an evil god 2,000 years ago. Kyle, he knows, is the main character of this story, the reincarnation of the knight who protected that very sage. They have both been reborn to reveal the evil god, who is beginning to resurrect. But for now, they possess neither the memories nor the powers of their past lives. The stakes are impossibly high. To break the seal, the evil god has sent monsters from the rift to kill them. The ultimate goal of their journey is to restore their lost memories and powers. Should either Kyle or Raya die, the evil god will resurrect, and the world will be destroyed. This knowledge is the reason he cannot simply abandon his duty and escape. He must remain to keep them alive, resolving to take countermeasure for the inevitable event of Silva's death. Having steeled his resolve, he turns to the pair, announcing that he came to talk to them. He focuses on Kyle, stating that he has something he wants to give him. Kyle looks back, puzzled, and asks what it could be. In response, he presents the shaft of a long, silver spear. Kyle's eyes widen as he recognizes the weapon. Mia, now sitting up and fully alert, gasps in shock. She identifies it as the captain's spear, the very symbol of their troop. Kyle recoils, shouting that there is no way he can accept such a thing. He foresees a coming trial, an event that will force Kyle and Raya to flee after she awakens. They will face countless dangerous situations and powerful monsters. He is certain that with this silver spear, even Kyle, despite his low status, will be able to overcome the ordeal. He continued to press the spear towards Kyle, urging him to take it. But Kyle, with wide, panicked eyes, pushed back against the weapon, insisting that he couldn't possibly accept it. The young man physically recoiled, his hands flat against the spear's shaft, creating distance between himself and the offered weapon. He acknowledged Kyle's feelings, but insisted there wasn't enough time for hesitation. He tried to downplay the significance, calling it just a spear, but then shifted tactics, declaring it a captain's order. To refuse, he warned, will be a breach of military protocol. With the spear now in Kyle's hands, he turned to Mia for reinforcement, asking for her opinion. A flustered Mia shyly agreed that it suited him well. See, he said, turning back to Kyle, you look great with it. As Kyle looked on in dismay, he declared his next intention, to address Mia. Her eyes widened in surprise, questioning if she was also to be involved. He then presented a small, cross-like emblem to her, placing it in her open hands and asking her to accept it. She looked down at the object, recognizing it with a questioning tone. Captain, he confirmed her unspoken thought with a decisive gesture, announcing that as of today, she was the new captain. Mia's shock was absolute. She immediately protested, crying out that there was no way she could fulfill such a role. But his plan was already in motion. He knew that Mia Hawkeye, Kyle's childhood friend, was one of the story's heroines. Though her power was difficult to use in the early stages, at higher levels her unique skill with a bow and spirits made her one of the best support characters available. There was a mechanism that granted captains bonus experience points, and he intended to use it to level her up, all in order to overcome the fated death of Silva. Despite her continued, flustered refusals, he simply smiled and encouraged her to try putting the insignia on her shoulder. Her gaze fell as she explained her reasoning. She had only just joined the troop and had barely learned the names of her fellow soldiers. The responsibility felt immense and undeserved. She stands frozen as the player attempts to reassure her. He explains that he managed the role, so she will be fine too. He tells her to simply give out orders as captain and leave the troublesome office work to Natalya. He continues, stating that this decision was not of his own will. Mia reacts in shock as he claims it is the will of the Eternal Tree, as written in a prophetic book. In the Holy Empire of Eternia, the Eternal Tree is revered not just as the symbol of the nation, but as God itself. Therefore, the Eternal Tree's will is considered the highest form of order, an absolute command that a soldier must follow without question. The player internally admits that this story sounds strange even to him. In truth, it was a decree given to him by the Throne Maiden that morning. Then, his expression hardens. He knows it's all a lie. There is no such thing as God's will, but he decides they don't need to know that. Back with the others, Natalya asks Kyle what they should do. Kyle resigns himself to the situation, telling a distraught Mia to do her best as captain since a prophecy cannot be defied. He then turns to the player, asking the former captain what his plans are now. The player encourages Natalya, assuring her that her talent will properly support Mia. He answers with a confident grin, announcing that he is thinking of going on a little trip. As he prepares to leave, he reflects on how gullible they were. There was a small protest from Natalya, but he's sure they'll be fine. His thoughts shift to the real problem, whether the army can grow strong enough in the 4 weeks leading up to Silva's death event. This outcome, he realizes, will greatly determine the course of his life. He resolves that there are 3 main objectives to accomplish. His first objective is to make himself stronger by leveling up and completing his armor. He muses that Silva's abilities are already too powerful, making it inefficient to train him further at this early stage. Therefore, he considers his own power increase a secondary bonus. The second goal, then, is to level up the other characters. He explains that besides Silva, the troop members are all low-leveled and poorly equipped, so he expects them to grow significantly. For now, leveling up is the only path to strength. He also notes that if someone like him, who can defeat weak enemies instantly, were to join them, it would negatively impact the distribution of experience points. He considered his next objective. With the initial preparations made, the third goal for this journey was to find new allies, as there were many potential candidates. He knew that, depending on the method used, it was possible to recruit those with extraordinary abilities even in the early stages of the story. Suddenly, a desperate cry of no pierced the air. It was Silva Pierce, who had been contemplating the most efficient path forward. To gain strong allies in a limited time, he knew he had to avoid unnecessary actions and progress through multiple storylines at once. This was an unwelcome interruption. He pushed his way through the dense foliage, moving toward the source of the commotion. He stopped short as a woman's voice cried out, pleading for help. Without thinking, he told her to stay put. Before he could react further, she was violently seized from behind, her scream cut short. His eyes widened as he saw her attackers, goblins. He recalled the lore from the game Yoi. There were no female goblins, so they used young human women to reproduce. Such a vile event was never shown in the game, but here, before him, was the horrifying proof. This was real life, not a game. The woman shrieked in terror as the creatures began to rip her clothes away. Silva was frozen by a terrible conflict. In the game, he would have ignored this, taking the shortest, most efficient route. But this wasn't a game. He stood his ground, his mind made up. He couldn't just leave her like this. With a look of grim resolve, he lunged into the fray. His sword flashed, cleanly decapitating one of the goblins as he began his furious counterattack. He cut through the last of the goblins, his blade a whirlwind of steel. The creatures fell before his relentless assault, their bodies littering the forest floor. With the final goblin dispatched, he turned his attention to the woman he had rescued. She looked up at him, her face smudged with dirt and tears as he knelt down, asking gently if she was all right. She leaned against him, finding safety in his presence after the terrifying ordeal. He stood guard, his sword held ready, a silent protector in the quiet aftermath. Her initial shock gave way to confusion. She asked who he was and where they were, her voice trembling. He simply identified himself as a passerby who had dealt with the monsters. As she stammered in realization that he had saved her, he glanced at her status, internally lamenting the significant amount of time this detour had cost him. His gaze sharpened as he processed the information. Her status was exceptionally weak. He had briefly considered recruiting her if she possessed any strength, but now he understood the truth. She was merely an NPC, a non-player character. As he turned to leave, she called out, pleading for him to wait. She thanked him profusely and insisted on repaying him, explaining that not doing so would tarnish her reputation as a merchant. He dismissed her offer, stating there was no need. He was in a hurry, he explained, and urged her to leave the forest so his effort wouldn't be wasted. She reached out a hand, her voice desperate, but he did not stop. He walked away, leaving her alone in the clearing, his mission taking precedence. Sometime later, mounted on a steed, he crested a hill overlooking a sprawling city. A massive coliseum dominated the skyline. He noted with some relief that despite the delay, he had managed to arrive on time. This was the land of Fist, one of the kingdom's most prominent cities, revered as a sacred ground for martial arts. Even in the early stages of the game, it was an accessible location offering unique opportunities, though it held no direct connection to the main storyline. He stood silhouetted in a grand, shadowed archway, his purpose clear in his mind. He had come to this city for one specific reason. He stood before a roaring crowd, his name echoing through the arena. Silva Pierce. Whispers spread among the spectators, identifying the challenger as a mysterious assassin from the royal capital. But his own thoughts were clear and focused on a singular purpose. He needed to earn money and fame here. In the world of Yoi, there exists a statistic known as fame, tied directly to one's reputation. It increases to grant access to better discounts and special quests. While the main story offers its own path, the best side quest for earning fame is found in the arena, a true test of rising up through one's own strength. The winner of the latest bout is announced to the roaring crowd. Silva Pierce, a young, silver-haired noble who seemed to appear from nowhere. For him, a victory of this magnitude is a simple matter. Following his victory, an official congratulates him on a job well done and hands over the reward money for the day's fight. He takes his earnings to a store. The reward from the fight is random, and he receives an item called the toe of the Great Runner. He considers it neither great nor terrible. More importantly, he now has a pouch of coins, which he judges to be more than enough for his next endeavor. His destination is a paradise for gamblers, a place of fistfights by day and high stakes by night. The casino known as Fortune. A woman in a bunny outfit welcomes the patrons, but he has come to this place with only one goal in mind. That goal is simple: making money. Dice tumble across the felt tables as stacks of chips are won and lost. He sits at a table, observing the flow of the game. He muses that this particular game isn't supposed to be a way of making money, but its realistic nature provides an exception, a perfect opportunity for all-out gambling. The game is blackjack. The rules are extremely simple. One must get as close to a total of 21 as possible without going over. With a confident smirk, he makes his decision. The night is still young, and he is determined to rake in the dough. He declares his move, stand. His gamble pays off. As the sun rises over the city walls, he departs from the casino, a heavy sack of winnings slung over his shoulder. He remarks on his good luck and takes his leave. He had a guaranteed method for victory: card counting. The game was designed to be as realistic as possible, which meant it had exploitable flaws. He brushed off any potential issues, confident in his success. While he hadn't earned as much as he could have, he had already reached his target for the night. He mused that, unlike in the real world, the casinos here lacked countermeasures, allowing anyone with enough time to amass a fortune. As he prepared to leave, a commotion at the entrance caught his attention. A young woman was desperately pleading with a staff member, explaining that her outfit didn't meet the dress code. Suddenly, she spotted him, and her face lit up with recognition. "It's the super strong guy from earlier," she exclaimed, rushing towards him and asking if he remembered her. He initially feigned ignorance, telling her she must have mistaken him for someone else. But she was insistent, declaring she would never forget the man who saved her life from the goblins. He sighed, realizing she was far more stubborn than he'd anticipated. The young woman admitted her embarrassment over the situation, but was determined not to remain indebted. His expression shifted to one of surprise as he asked how she managed to travel safely. She beamed, explaining that she simply followed the trail of defeated monsters he had left in his wake, which made her journey remarkably easy. Despite her profuse gratitude, he remained dismissive. He told her that if a simple thank you was all she wanted, she should be satisfied and leave, as he was in a hurry. He considered that perhaps she had just been lucky, the scent of goblin blood from their first encounter masking her presence from other monsters. She then revealed the true reason for her persistence, crying out that the staff wouldn't let her into the casino. She begged him to help, calling it discrimination. Annoyed, he pointed to the rules posted at the entrance. Attire must be worth at least 10,000 G to enter. The girl despaired, saying such clothes would bankrupt her, but he bluntly told her to give up, as rules were rules. Her hopes were instantly dashed. No way, she whispered, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She had traveled so far with the dream of getting rich quick. Seeing her dejection, he asked a simple question. Why did she need money so badly? She looked up at him, momentarily confused. She then recounted her story, explaining that her dream was to open her own store in the capital. She had left her hometown at 20 with this goal in mind, only to be immediately attacked by goblins and then barred from the very place she hoped would fund her dream. As he listened to her tale of misfortune, he internally questioned her plan to get rich through gambling, wondering if she was an idiot. Yet he also recognized a strange honesty and obedience in her, and a thought began to form. Perhaps she could be useful. He looked down at the young woman, a slight smile on his lips, and informed her that he would make her work for it. She could only stammer in surprise. She pressed him for a reason, admitting her desire for the money, but questioning why he would help her. He simply replied that it was a whim. He then asked for her name. The young woman eagerly introduced herself as Roma from Maiden Village, placing herself in his care. As they walked together down a stone corridor, he began to explain his plan. She asked how he intended to make money in a place like this, and he confidently declared his intention to earn it by fighting in the city's famous arena. She remarked on his bluntness. The realization dawned on her. He wanted her to be his corner man. With renewed enthusiasm, she accepted the role, proudly stating he could count on her skill at throwing in the towel. He immediately shut down her assumption, stating that she wasn't understanding at all. Confused, she asked what he actually wanted her to do. In response, he handed her a large, heavy sack of coins. His instruction was simple. She was to take all of it and bet on him. She struggled under the immense weight, exclaiming how heavy it was. He calmly informed her that the sack contained about 2 million G, warning her not to drop it. The amount stunned her. She shrieked in disbelief, asking if he had truly won all of it just now at the casino. He snapped at her, calling her an idiot and ordering her not to shout the amounts so loudly. He then gave her a final, stern command. She was to bet on him for the next 3 matches, and she had better not lose the money before then. Terrified, she could only agree. He watched as Roma stammered, confirming she understood her task. With a look of deep concern, she then asked him who exactly he would be fighting in the upcoming match. His calm reply sent a jolt of panic through her. He was fighting the grandmaster of the arena. Roma's eyes widened in horror. She cried out that it was madness and demanded to know why he would do such a thing. She elaborated on her terror, explaining that the grandmaster was Tyron the Wicked, a man who had remained undefeated for 3 whole years. Even she, a simple villager, knew of his fearsome reputation. Her warnings grew more frantic. She insisted he couldn't do it, that he could die. She described Tyron as a true villain who runs the city's slave and drug trades, a man who wouldn't hesitate to cheat to win. Silva, however, merely smiled, explaining that Tyron's infamy was precisely why the betting odds would be so high. He confidently told her not to worry, as he was far more familiar with men like Tyron than she was. Sometime later, in the arena, an announcer declared Silva pierced the winner after he took out a top-ranked fighter in a single moment. As the announcer tried to interview him, Silva snatched the microphone. He introduced himself to the roaring crowd as a mysterious rising star, then voiced his disappointment, claiming the fighters he'd faced were weaker than goblins. He proclaimed he had come from the capital specifically to find strong opponents. He continued his speech, openly mocking the Grandmaster, deliberately misremembering his name as the wild baldy muscle man and questioning his undefeated record. His eyes then scanned the crowd and fixed on a woman with cat-like ears, remarking that she looked like a creature from a fairy tale and was perfect for a champion. He brazenly told her not to be scared and to come with him, drawing the ire of another spectator who shouted at him to stop the abuse. The provocation hit its mark. While Silva wore a confident, challenging smirk, Tyron the Wicked watched from elsewhere, his face contorted in a furious, teeth-baring snarl. In response to this insult, heavy, enraged footsteps echoed down a stone corridor, signaling an imminent confrontation. Later, in a back room, Silva stood calmly over the bodies of several unconscious men. Roma burst through the doorway, distraught, shouting that she had told him this was a bad idea. Feigning ignorance, Silva simply asked who the defeated men were. He then turned to her, his voice low and serious. He confirmed her fears, stating they were likely sent by Tyron. He warned her to be careful from now on and to ensure no one saw them speaking together. He approaches a betting counter, his face obscured by a hood, and declares his intention to place a massive wager on himself to win. The clerk behind the counter stares, stunned by the bold declaration. The wager placed, the scene shifts to the grand arena, where the stands are packed with a sea of spectators eagerly awaiting the main event. Down in the center of that arena, the 7th match is announced. Tyron the Despicable versus Silva Pierce. The two combatants lock eyes, a palpable tension filling the air between them. Tyron breaks the silence, addressing Silva as boy and mockingly praising him for making it this far. He acknowledges Silva is strong enough to be a challenger, then makes an offer. If Silva retracts his insults and swears fealty, Tyron might consider taking him in, sparing him a beating so severe he'd never walk again. With a sharp grin, Silva thanks him for the offer, but firmly declines. He explains that his popularity would plummet if people thought he worked alongside a troll. The insult strikes a nerve. Tyron's face darkens, and he claims to be a merciful man, willing to pretend he didn't hear the remark. He gives one final command: bow and swear fealty. Unimpressed, Silva dismisses the posturing as a waste of time. He tells Tyron to cut the nonsense and attack him already, mockingly asking if his hands are just for decoration. The final taunt pushes Tyron over the edge. Roaring that since Silva has bared his fangs, he can die right there, Tyron springs his trap. Instantly, two large, complex magic circles flare to life on the arena floor. His eyes widen in sudden understanding. He realizes the magic circles must have been buried in the arena and set up ahead of time. The nature of the trap becomes clear. One circle creates a binding field to slow him down, while the other generates a vulnerability field to lower his physical defense. As this happens, Tyron is being buffed by his own magicians. Silva grits his teeth, acknowledging the awful number of precautions taken against him. He remains perfectly still within the magical bindings as Tyron, the Wicked, charges, slamming a powerful fist into the arena floor. The stone shatters under the impact, but the captain is nowhere to be seen. From the stands, Roma and the player watch with wide, concerned eyes. The massive warrior pants heavily from the exertion, glaring at the empty space. He bellows a challenge, demanding to know what the piece of trash will do now against the strongest, insisting he acknowledge his power. In response to the taunt, Silva appears behind him, completely unharmed and with a confident smirk. He casually asks if Tyron is already finished with his attack. Tyron freezes, his mind racing. He calculates the damage per second of his rush, factoring in the defense debuff from the magic circle. Even when subtracting the value of Silva's passive skill, the numbers don't add up. He cannot comprehend how his opponent is unscathed. With a slight wince, Silva confirms he felt the attack, remarking that he now knows what taking exactly 100 damage feels like. Tyron stares in disbelief, shouting that it's impossible for him to still be standing. He then explains that he had been wanting to perform a damage test for some time, but finding anyone capable of actually hurting him was proving difficult. He mockingly thanks Tyron, stating that his cheap tricks provided some decent data. As Tyron stammers in confusion, Silva's expression hardens. His eyes gleam with predatory intent as he clarifies that Tyron was just the kind of insignificant opponent he was looking for to conduct his experiment. The insult pushes Tyron over the edge, and he roars that there is no way he could lose. In response, a powerful aura erupts around Silva as he lets out a battle cry of his own. From that surge of energy, a colossal fist made of rock and earth materializes in the air and slams downward into Tyron, lifting the massive man off his feet with sheer force. He crashes into the arena floor, the stone cracking and shattering violently from the impact. A short distance away, Silva stands perfectly composed, the summoner of the devastating blow. He stood over the wreckage, his back to the stunned crowd. In the arena below, Tyron's body lay motionless amidst the shattered earth. From the stands, a young man watched, utterly speechless at the swift and brutal conclusion. The shock was palpable. Roma stared, her expression a mixture of disbelief and horror. A voice began to echo through the silent arena, making the official declaration. Grandmaster Tyron had lost consciousness and was unable to continue the fight. The announcement reached its crescendo, booming for all to hear. The winner was Silva Pierce. A confident, predatory smirk spread across Silva's face as he accepted his victory. In a flurry of banknotes, Roma cheers with unrestrained joy, tossing the money into the air. Overwhelmed, she admits she's never seen so much wealth before. From his seat, the player calls out to get her attention, and she quickly apologizes, promising to clean up the mess. He closes his eyes with a sense of resignation. It can't be helped, he thinks, acknowledging that most people will never see such a sum in their entire lives. His composure baffles Roma. She questions how he can be so calm with 100 million G scattered on the floor, especially while staying in a cheap inn and eating tough jerky. Unfazed, he simply replies that he doesn't really mind the jerky. She insists that since they're in the casino city, they should be living lavishly in a fancy inn. He dismisses the idea, explaining that such a place is too far from the merchant's district and would be a waste of time. Roma's imagination runs wild as she describes the life he could lead. With his wealth, he could do anything he wanted, be known as a hero, and enjoy fine food while surrounded by beautiful women. Her tone shifts to one of pure awe. She asks why he is so powerful, declaring him the strongest person in the world, stronger than anyone she has ever witnessed. He calmly clarifies that he isn't here to rest or enjoy himself. He has, in his words, a mountain of things to do. Confused, she echoes his phrase, a mountain of stuff? His expression turns serious. He confirms her suspicion, stating that while he wouldn't call a mission, he does indeed have a bigger purpose. This revelation strikes Roma with the force of a thunderclap. Her eyes fill with sparkling admiration as she declares his dedication impressive. She realizes he isn't swayed by greed or desire, but is focused on a grander goal. For her, meeting him is the greatest thing that has ever happened. And so, completely overwhelmed by her respect for him, she prostrates herself on the floor. With her forehead pressed to the wooden planks, she makes a solemn request to be allowed to accompany him to the very end of his journey. Her plea hangs in the air as the player considers her. He reminds her of her own ambitions, questioning why she wouldn't want to open her own store in the capital, a dream she could now easily achieve with her share of the winnings. He tells her she is overestimating him, but from her position on the floor, she insists that isn't true, begging him to accept. With a weary sigh, he finally relents. Geez. Okay then. Her expression instantly shifts to one of wide-eyed, hopeful disbelief. Before she can react further, he leans in, gently taking her chin and asking her to repeat where she is from. Startled, she stammers that she comes from Madden Village, a small place known for sheep and cows. His mind flashes to the place she named, Maiden Village. He recalls it from the game he's played thousands of times, an insignificant town, not even on the map, with no quests or stores. His only memory of it is the endless grind of killing sheep for their resources. Returning to the present, he produces a piece of paper with the letters B and C written on it. He holds it out, asking if she can read it. She squints, completely baffled, asking if it's some kind of foreign language. He confirms her inability to read the letters. Internally, he concludes his test. He had suspected she might be a reincarnator like him, but this proves she is just a normal character. She remains confused by his strange line of questioning. His test complete, he lays out his final terms. He asks if she will obey him from now on and if she promises not to regret her choice, no matter how dangerous their path becomes. With unwavering resolve, she agrees, stating her mind is made up. He accepts her vow, warning her that he won't be held responsible for whatever happens. Her face erupts in pure joy. She thanks him profusely and promises to do anything she can to be useful. As she beams, he lets out a quiet sigh. Her energy renewed, she immediately asks what their next move is. He watches her, a faint smile on his face as he thinks to himself. He loses nothing by taking her along, and this seemingly ordinary background character might just be the key to a new way of beating the game. He listens as Roma excitedly speculates about their next mission. Perhaps they are off to another city to vanquish evil, or maybe to defeat a giant monster. He cuts her heroic fantasies short, stating that their actual destination is not even close. Instead of a grand quest, their task for the day is far more mundane, enjoying some wonderful shopping in a bustling town square. He instructs her to buy everything he told her about earlier, reassured her not to worry about the money, and to simply get whatever she can. Roma confirms she understands. With the instructions given, he decides they will split up there, watching as she heads off into the market. Now on his own, his true objective comes into focus, finding equipment for the next stage. He reflects on the world's mechanics, how equipment possesses various rarities and can be enchanted with random effects using magic stones. Since each piece can only have up to 6 effects, the chance of creating an optimal item is extremely low. His search ends as his eyes land on a specific item in the shop. He examines his find, a plain, one-handed sword. It's an unremarkable weapon that can only hold a single enchantment, yet it is sold at a surprisingly high price for its limited capabilities. The shopkeeper quotes the price at 200,000 G. The player knows that while enchanting is normally random, having enough money allows one to obtain a desired effect with certainty. Given his lack of time, this is the perfect solution. He places a heavy pouch on the counter and demands a sale. With his purchase secured, he exits the shop and walks through the town's stone-paved streets, his expression grim and focused. A wave of exhaustion hits him. He realizes he hasn't had a single moment of rest since arriving in this world. Though he wants to stop, he knows he still has more to accomplish today. His path leads him to a sturdy wooden door in a quiet alley. Before he can knock, a voice from a small window slit challenges him, demanding to know what he wants. He confronts the hooded figure, identifying them as the informant. He questions their activities, suggesting they might be secretly selling strawberry daifuku. The figure retorts that nobody calls them that. The informant's eye widens in surprise before they ask what he wants to know. With a steady gaze, he states his purpose. He wants information on the syndicate. The hooded figure immediately denies any knowledge of the syndicate, claiming to have nothing to offer and telling him to look elsewhere. The player watches them, his expression revealing his disbelief. He turns as if to leave, recalling the old game mechanic. One had to visit the informant countless times to earn their trust and advance the quest. Instead of walking away, he stops and places a hand on the wall, activating a skill. Lightning blink. In a flash, he teleports through the solid wall, appearing directly inside the informant's hidden room. The informant recoils in shock, demanding to know how he got in. The player calmly remarks that this is no way to treat a customer. Now inside, he presses his advantage, stating he knows what the informant knows and will pay the fee. Panicked, the informant insists they know nothing and begs him to leave. The player then reveals his trump card, questioning how the informant, the new king of the arena, could possibly know such a thing. Having acquired the information, he tosses a pouch of money to the informant, telling them to use it to run away. Clutching the payment, the informant warns him to stay away from a syndicate if he values his life before scurrying away into a dark alley. Alone once more, he reflects on the exchange. He already knew what the informant would say. The crucial step was asking them after gaining a certain amount of fame. He believes he has fulfilled the necessary conditions, though a sliver of uncertainty remains. His thoughts are cut short as a swirling vortex of dark energy materializes and slams into a nearby building, causing a violent explosion. He stares, wide-eyed, at the sudden destruction. He watched as a figure emerged from the destruction, their voice cold and clear, issuing a chilling decree. Anyone who investigates the faceless ones will be sentenced to death. The assailant stood revealed, a cloaked individual with dark hair and glasses, a mask obscuring their lower face, poised for combat. As the figure lunged, he dodged, shouting in alarm. He instantly recognized the situation. This was the main quest concerning the faceless conspiracy. The attacker was one of Tyron's troublesome subordinates, possessing high stats and wielding 2 swords. He understood his mission was to investigate the syndicate's secret activities and stop their plot. The attacker closed the distance, and he identified their unique weapon, Dark Moon, a set of blades named Waxing Moon and Waning Moon. He recalled the properties of the right-hand blade, the Waxing Moon. It applied a bleeding status condition that, unlike most, could be stacked repeatedly. The left-hand blade, the Waning Moon, dealt more damage for every stack of bleeding applied to an opponent. He knew with grim certainty that if he took even a single hit, the damage would snowball out of control. As the assassin leaped down from above, he cursed the situation. The entire scenario felt deliberately malicious, forcing him to fight such a troublesome opponent in a cramped alley with no room to maneuver. He threw himself to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack as the assassin's blades shattered the stone ground where he had just been standing. The assassin coolly told him to calm down, but he knew better. He retorted that they clearly had no intention of listening to him. He leaped back again, creating distance. He mused that simply defeating them would be easy, but his goals were more complex. He needed them in one piece for the future. Capturing them unharmed was a tall order, especially since they would simply teleport away at the slightest hint of danger. He resolved that he had no choice. Letting his opponent escape would ruin all his plans. Sweat beaded on his brow as he stared down the masked figure, asking if they were ready for this. The assassin's eyes narrowed, poised for action. The assassin lunged forward down the narrow alley. Unfazed, he spread his arms with a wild grin, taunting them. He acknowledged they'd been aiming for his neck the whole time, and for their persistence, offered them a single chance to strike. In a flash, the assassin closed the distance, but he was ready. He caught the attack, grabbing his opponent's arm firmly. A grimace of pain crossed his face from the impact, but he gritted his teeth, declaring that he'd finally caught them. Before they could recover, he twisted his body, executing a powerful judo throw that sent the assassin crashing to the ground. He coughed, catching his breath, and reflected that his old judo training had just come in handy. With his opponent subdued, he reached down and pulled off their mask, revealing the face of a young woman, tears streaming from her wide, frightened eyes. He spoke softly, expressing pity that she had to wear such a thing and promising she would feel better soon. His gaze then fell upon a trickle of blood. The woman's eyes were vacant, unfocused. She began to murmur a strange, disjointed litany of words and images, junctions and regret, impulse, pinwheels, puddles of blood, flower fields, and finally, coming home. Her voice was filled with a sorrowful confusion. Her gaze remained distant, one of her pupils appearing unervingly mechanical. With a final, chilling whisper, she uttered a single phrase, "The abyss." The scene seems to shift. He now leans over her, his expression intense as he tries to rouse her from her trance. He calls out her name, "Wake up, Mitsuki." It's morning. Her eyes flutter open, filled with confusion. She looks up at him, dazed, and asks a question that stops him cold. "Oni-chan?" His own eyes widen in utter shock and disbelief. On the floor of a dilapidated building, Silva Pierce looks up at the hooded assassin, a dark wound visible on his chest. He remarks that his little sister has caused him a lot of trouble. The assassin, Mitsuki, apologizes meekly before her eyes widen in confusion, asking why her Oni-chan is even there. He leans closer, his expression intense. He tells her not to worry and to simply do everything he says, reminding her that it has always been this way. Mitsuki's face contorts in shock and disbelief. This young woman, Mitsuki, is a member of the Faceless Syndicate's assassin division. She is one of the human weapons they created, possessing inhuman abilities that guarantee she can eliminate any target. The words Silva spoke were a trigger. He was performing a brainwashing technique. Anyone who utters a few specific words to her will be perceived as her older brother, compelling her to follow their orders without question. He reflects internally that while using such a method is bothersome, he has now gained a reliable companion. After all, Mitsuki is a high-rank assassin, starting at level 40. His strategy is clear. At this stage, he wants only the most overpowered characters as his companions. Turning to the now docile Mitsuki, he offers her some candy, to which she responds with a cheerful yay. Her entire demeanor shifts. She clings to him affectionately, asking what they will do next and eagerly offering to kill someone for him. Her expression is one of pure, devoted happiness. He looks down at her calmly and tells her that she doesn't have to kill people anymore. Mitsuki seems surprised by this new command. His calm facade breaks as a sharp pain causes him to clutch his chest. Mitsuki's cheerful expression instantly vanishes, replaced by wide-eyed concern as she asks if he is okay. He grits his teeth, stating they will go back to the inn. He opens a small container, preparing a remedy. The bleeding status from the Dark Moon ability deals considerable damage, and even with his high endurance, his body cannot handle it on its own. Despite this, he turns to Mitsuki and reassures her that he is fine and it's nothing to worry about. He winces, clutching his side as a sharp pain courses through him. He vows to never repeat whatever caused this, while Mitsuki looks on with a quiet intensity. The effort proves too much, and he collapses backward onto a pile of sacks, crying out in exhaustion. Lying there, he gazes at the ceiling, reflecting that despite things going well for the past 3 days, he wonders if he has finally earned a moment of rest. He then tells Mitsuki that she can rest as well, gesturing toward a nearby chair. Surprised by the offer, she quietly accepts. The relative quiet is shattered as a young woman with braided hair bursts into the room, cheerfully announcing her return to her Aniki. She proudly declares that on her first day as a henchman, she performed her duties perfectly, only to stop short upon noticing Mitsuki, demanding to know who the stranger is. The newcomer looks on in shock as Mitsuki, turning to Silva, asks who this noisy girl is, referring to him as Onii-chan. The newcomer, flustered, immediately apologizes, believing she has interrupted something inappropriate. Silva quickly interjects, telling her not to misunderstand the situation, and formally introduces the quiet figure as his little sister, Mitsuki. Stunned by the revelation, the girl explains that she ran into Mitsuki by chance while shopping and offers another flustered apology. She then composes herself and bows deeply, introducing herself as Roma, her Aniki's loyal henchman, and expresses her hope to get along. Mitsuki looks down at the bowing girl, her expression unreadable as she silently considers the word henchman. With introductions complete, Roma proudly presents a sack filled with dark, multifaceted gems, eagerly asking for an opinion on her haul. She explained that, as instructed, she had visited every material store in the city, buying out their entire stock of the multifaceted gems. She puffed out her chest, proudly asking if she had managed to acquire a decent amount. This work, she declared, was proof of her admiration. He looked down with a faint smile, admitting that while it was a good start, it was nowhere near enough. They needed, he stated, about 10 times that amount. Her expression crumbled, tears welling in her eyes. He told her she could rest for the day, but that she would have to continue her search tomorrow, moving on to the next town if necessary. Crestfallen, she meekly agreed to do her best. As she walked away, Mitsuki appeared and asked why that thing was following him. Silva corrected her, stating that despite appearances, Roma had a lot of guts. He then turned to Mitsuki, telling her he would need her help tomorrow as well, and instructed her to get a good night's rest. She simply agreed. The setting shifts to a town square, where a tall, masked figure confronts a smaller, hooded subordinate. The leader calls them Number 7, noting their tardiness and demanding an explanation. Number 7 reports that the target was stronger than expected, forcing them to break their mask. They claim they brought him in alive, against orders to kill, because the technology he possessed was in a high combat state. The masked leader looks down at the unconscious form of Silva Pierce. They ask if Number 7 used drugs to incapacitate him before tying him up, which the subordinate confirms. The leader's eye narrows in thought. They concede that Silva wouldn't be a problem even if he woke up, yet there is a clear hesitation in their assessment. Standing over the captive, the leader remarks that it's rare for Number 7 to bring a target back alive, questioning if this is the first time. Number 7 looks away, replying only, "I don't remember." The hooded operative stands before their leader, who asks if their memory serves them correctly about the location. Number 7 confirms it is, but reports that they found no traces left behind. The leader turns away, stating they knew it. They then question Number 7 directly, asking if they have experienced anything abnormal regarding their state of mind. Elsewhere, within a cell, the captive Silva Pierce considers his grim situation. He realizes this is bad. If his captors manage to overwrite his brainwashing, he'll be forced to fight his way out. His greatest fear, however, is that in the chaos, his companion might teleport away. The scene shifts to Mitsuki, who declares with fierce loyalty that she will execute anyone her Onii-chan commands, even a member of the syndicate. Hearing this, the masked leader seems to accept her words, instructing Number 7 to take the prisoner to the cells. A sudden crash interrupts them. The source of the noise is a man in a white cloak, who grunts in pain as Number 7 slams him to the ground. He quickly recovers, however, and Mitsuki rushes to his side, asking if her Onii-chan is alright. He reassures her that he's fine, merely commenting that the clothes he's wearing feel strange. He praises her for her concern, calling her a good girl and offering her a piece of candy as a reward. As she celebrates, he asks her to lead him to the place she had mentioned. In what seems to be an earlier moment, the man in white stands at the end of a ship, suddenly on alert. He demands to know who is there, only to be confronted by Number 7, poised to attack. The sound of that confrontation echoes to the masked leader's location. He and another hooded figure are startled, demanding to know what the noise is and what is happening. Returning to the prison infiltration, the man in white stands victorious over several fallen guards. He asks Mitsuki which cell they are in, and she points down the stone corridor, stating it's the one all the way in the back. They proceed to the end of the hall and find their target. Huddled on the cold floor of a dark cell is Natalya Norfolk, alone. He peers into the darkened cell, where a pair of defiant eyes meets his gaze. A voice, rough from disuse, calls out, questioning if he is a new warden and, more simply, if he is alive. The voice belongs to a young woman, shackled and gagged, sitting on the cold stone floor. Despite her condition, she makes a request: hot soup and some soft bread to celebrate their acquaintance. He apologizes, explaining he is not with the masked guards, and offers her some food. As he does, Mitsuki peeks out from behind his cloak, calling out a cheerful greeting to Akatsuki-chan. The prisoner's eyes widen in disbelief. Stunned, Akatsuki questions Mitsuki's presence, warning her of the danger. She hears Mitsuki say her Onii-chan brought her, and Akatsuki's shock instantly curdles into rage. She lunges forward, accusing the man of harming Mitsuki again. He calmly addresses the mad dog princess, urging her to calm down and reminding her he is not with the syndicate. Unconvinced, she demands to know why Mitsuki would call him her older brother. Her fury builds as she accuses him of using Mitsuki and forcing her to kill. She screams, demanding to know how many lives have been taken on his orders. He quietly admits to using brainwashing, offering no excuse. "I knew it," she cries out. He clarifies that while he doesn't know Mitsuki's past body count, he has never ordered her to kill anyone and never will. Akatsuki refuses to believe him, shouting that it's a lie meant to trick and use her too. Leaning closer, his gaze is unwavering. He asks if someone with eyes as clear as his could possibly be telling a lie. His question gives Akatsuki pause, her fiery anger momentarily replaced by doubt. The prisoner's identity is revealed. She is Akatsuki, the sixth of her kind and Mitsuki's twin sister, another human weapon forged from the same genes. But her emotional outbursts and unique traits led her to be branded a failure and locked away. This truth hangs heavy in the air. Akatsuki stares, wide-eyed, as a single thought pierces through her rage. Is it possible he's not lying? The masked man explains that Akatsuki possesses a skill called Lie Breaker, allowing her to discern truth from falsehood just by looking into someone's eyes. This ability rendered the syndicate's brainwashing useless, branding her a failure. He believes that as long as his intentions are pure, he can reason with her. He then turns to Mitsuki, asking if she was ever ordered to kill. She considers this, recalling that the previous Onii-chan had commanded her to kill, but this new one has not. The effort of remembering causes her to cry out in pain, clutching her head. The masked man gently places a hand on her head, telling her not to think about it too much. Observing this act of kindness, Akatsuki concludes that he truly isn't aligned with the syndicate. Still, she calls him an idiot with zero sense of danger for infiltrating the facility all by himself. He simply meets her gaze with a confident grin. He concedes that he may be an idiot, but clarifies he is the kind who saves other rebels who defied orders. Standing before her cell, he turns his back to her. With suspicion still clouding her features, Akatsuki demands to know what he wants. His reply is simple. He wants her help. When she presses him for what purpose, his expression hardens with resolve. He declares his intention to take over the syndicate, leaving both Mitsuki and Akatsuki stunned into silence. Before anyone can react to his declaration, a group of robed syndicate guards appears at the end of the corridor, blocking their escape. One shouts a curse, vowing that the intruder will not leave alive. Their sudden appearance prompts Akatsuki to mock his plan, asking if he intends to die after making such a grand statement. Unfazed, the masked man tells her to simply watch. As he speaks, Mitsuki springs forward, intercepting the first guard with incredible speed. In that same instant, a cataclysmic blast of energy erupts from the masked man's position. The entire passageway is consumed by a jagged, blinding light as he unleashes a single, devastating attack. Judgment. The aftermath leaves the two sisters in awe. Akatsuki stares, utterly shocked by the display of power. Mitsuki, however, is filled with admiration, proclaiming that her Onii-chan is amazing. He turns back to Akatsuki's cell. She asks him why he is going to such lengths. He explains that he has his reasons, but fundamentally, he needs the power of the syndicate to find and defeat the true mastermind behind it all. He repeats his offer, stating plainly that he needs her help. He extends his hand towards the gagged and shackled Akatsuki, making his request plain. He needs her help to take over the syndicate. In response, Akatsuki sets a condition, asking him to promise her one thing. When he asks what it is, she demands that he never make Mitsuki kill again. He agrees immediately, explaining that his goal is a peaceful and clean syndicate. With a cold look, Akatsuki warns that if he breaks this promise, she will kill him herself. Having secured his vow, Akatsuki accepts. She immediately turns her attention to a massive, shadowy beast, roaring for it to surrender. She then calls out to Mitsuki, asking for a weapon. A sword is tossed her way, and Akatsuki leaps into the air to catch it, diving headfirst into battle. She lands gracefully, sword resting on her shoulder, a wild smile spreading across her face. Looking back at the masked man, she addresses him as Onii-chan and declares that they should get along. Sometime later, he stands beside Mitsuki, observing their surroundings. He confirms with satisfaction that all the necessary pieces are now in place. The scene shifts. A dark, armored figure notes that the final battle of the DLC is approaching, a critical point in their strategy that must not fail. Opposite them, Silva Pierce's expression is confident as he declares the battle against the DLC boss, the mastermind, has begun. His confident look twists into a sly grin. He poses a bizarre question, asking why his companion doesn't strip. He suggests she should turn over a new leaf and become a dancer. The request was for Natalya, North folk, who recoils in shock. She mutters that she accepted, but now regrets it, lamenting that even for the captain, she cannot wear something so revealing. She remains flustered, shaking her head as she insists it's impossible and far too embarrassing. Stealing her resolve, she decides she will speak to the captain and force him to reconsider his absurd demand. But Silva's voice cuts in, his tone suddenly stripped of all humor. His expression is desperate as he calls her by name, Natalya, pleading that he needs her help. He implores her to swear on the silver spear. Her fist slams against the door, the handle snapping off from the force of the impact. She realizes that to go back on her word now, after accepting, will be far too embarrassing. Having made her choice, she holds the silver spear, her gaze firm and unwavering as she begins to remove her armor. With resolve, she makes her vow. In order to keep her promise, she will abandon the title of knight. A short while later, she steps out, her armor replaced by a dancer's revealing attire. Apologizing for the wait, she nervously asks if this is what he wanted, all while questioning if she is truly better suited for this new role. From nearby, Silva's voice rings out in approval, declaring it perfect. Inside a rustic wooden building, Akatsuki lets out a sigh of relief, water cascading over her as she enjoys a much-needed bath. Watching from nearby, the man in the white hood, his mask off, remarks to himself that it has been a long time since he's had a proper bath. She then emerges from the bath, wrapped only in a small towel. He questions her lack of shame for coming out like that, but she retorts that she is far beyond such feelings. After the syndicate's men inspected every inch of her, she explains there's no way she could feel embarrassed by someone simply seeing her unclothed anymore. With a sudden burst of energy, she turns and shouts for Mitsuki, asking her to grab some underwear for her as well. Mitsuki immediately scolds her, insisting she can't walk around naked and warning her not to let her brother see her with his lewd eyes. As Akatsuki protests, the door bursts open and a young woman with twin braids announces her return. The newcomer cheerfully declares that she has the order, leaving Mitsuki stunned. She exclaims in disbelief, asking if her little sister has multiplied. The man calmly places a hand on Mitsuki's head, reassuring her that they are simply twins. He then turns his attention to the girl, asking if she is the subordinate he was told about. She confirms this is correct and formally introduces herself as Roma. Akatsuki warmly shakes Roma's hand, saying it's nice to meet her and adding that her brother praised her as an excellent worker. Flustered by the compliment, Roma stammers in disbelief. While offering praise, Akatsuki's expression is one of condescending authority, instantly cementing the hierarchy between them. She then gets to business, asking Roma if she brought what was requested. Roma eagerly confirms that she has. Roma explains that she traveled to every nearby city as instructed, presenting a large bag filled with dark, crystalline objects. The man inspects the contents and agrees it should be enough, commending her for a good job gathering them so quickly. Roma blushes, remarking that he's never praised her so directly before, all while a curious smirk forms on her face. Her expression makes him wonder what she's thinking. She apologizes for her earlier expression, explaining that she didn't know what the items were. They are called flash stones, she reveals, and demonstrates by crushing one between her gloved hands. A brilliant, painful light erupts, causing her twin to recoil in surprise. Her sister, rubbing her eyes, pleads not to be surprised like that again. Recovering, she asks what purpose the stones will serve. The masked man steps in, thanking the twins for their hard work and instructing them to remain on standby for their next orders. Though her sister seems momentarily confused, she agrees. With their preparations complete, he announces it's time to begin. Now, the final stage of their operation commences, the battle against the mastermind of the syndicate. Akatsuki is joined by a confident woman in white, who offers a knowing wink. The masked man rallies his companions, declaring with excitement that it's time to finish this extended conflict. Akatsuki and the woman in white voice their enthusiastic agreement. Their path leads them across an old stone bridge toward a cluster of weathered buildings nestled in the hills. The question hangs in the air. Could the mastermind truly be in such a place? As they draw closer, the woman in white lightly scolds the masked man. She remarks that she hadn't expected him to be such a worrywart, asking how many times she has to tell him, and suggests he could at least call her careful. Her expression shifts to surprise as she realizes their destination isn't marked on any maps. Unfazed, he turns to her with complete certainty, assuring her that their targets are indeed here. He elaborates on his confidence, explaining that while the mastermind has multiple potential bases, a few key pieces of information allow one to deduce the correct location. The first crucial clue, he continues, is the location of the syndicate. Another piece of the puzzle is the specific equipment Mitsuki will have upon their rendezvous. The masked man considered the capabilities of his new ally, Mitsuki. She consistently wields the unique weapon Dark Moon and is clad in the full faceless assassin set. Her necklace, however, is a variable element, randomly changing between 3 different varieties. He noted that for this occasion, she wore the plain version. Turning his attention to the mission, he looked towards the dark, cavernous entrance ahead. Considering the location of the syndicate's base, he was absolutely certain the mastermind would be there, He then glanced at his other companion, asking why she was wearing such a strange outfit. She cheerfully dismissed his question, explaining it was simply new equipment she had just purchased. Both she and Mitsuki then showered him with praise, exclaiming how cool he looked. The masked man offered Mitsuki candy for being a good girl, an offer she accepted with a delighted yay. Her light-hearted mood suddenly shifted to one of concern. She questioned his carefree attitude, reminding him that they were about to fight an incredibly powerful person. He remained calm, announcing they had arrived and gesturing towards an old stone well. He confirmed their target was right inside, leaving her in stunned disbelief. After descending into the well, the trio found themselves in a vast, circular cavern littered with the remains of pillars. As they took in the strange mausoleum, a deep voice echoed from the shadows, welcoming them as the first visitors his home had received in a long while. The woman with the headband called out, demanding to know who was there. The masked man, however, showed no surprise, his expression hardening with recognition. He knew exactly who it was, the leader of the syndicate and the final boss of the DLC. The voice continued, its tone dripping with amusement. It addressed two of its creations by name and number: Experimental Body Number 6, Akatsuki, and Experimental Body Number 7, Mitsuki. The voice expressed its pleasure that they had been raised so well, only to now be betraying their creator. It then acknowledged another presence among them, identifying him with precision. Silva Pierce, the captain of the 3rd Special Task Force of the Holy Eternia Kingdom. Silva's determined face appeared, his eyes fixed on the unseen enemy. At last, the syndicate mastermind revealed himself. He stood tall and imposing in the gloom, a dark, robed figure wielding an ornate staff, his features completely hidden in shadow. He looked down upon the intruders, his voice resonating with calm authority. He congratulated them on finding him, adding that the servant of the eternal tree, Silverwolf, must have a very sharp nose. The masked man's mind raced with excitement. He had never heard of this outcome before. Silva usually perishes in the prologue. To think that bringing him here would trigger such a super rare event was astonishing. Unaware of his observer's thoughts, the syndicate mastermind continued his speech, acknowledging the people, stories, and immense suffering they must have sacrificed to reach this place. The masked man, however, was unimpressed, thinking to himself that it had only been 5 days. He mentally corrected the mastermind's assumption. It had only been 5 days since he started. But the imposing figure simply repeated his belief that they must have experienced immense suffering. The mastermind completely ignored him, instead offering praise for their magnificent effort in finally finding him. His tone then shifted, becoming ominous as he declared that he, too, had made many sacrifices for his own grand goal. He proclaimed that he had finally achieved it. Before them materialized a massive, intricate construct, a fragment of Telios, the god of destruction's power. This, he explained, was the anima that once spiraled the world into its greatest disaster. The masked man watched, annoyed, thinking the man was revealing major story points far too early. His annoyance sharpened as the mastermind addressed the slaves of the eternal tree, commanding them to burn the sight into their eyes. He unleashed the power that would destroy the circle of the great tree, and a torrent of dark energy erupted from the anima. The power was too much to contain. The mastermind's body violently contorted and shattered as he screamed in agony, consumed by the very force he had summoned. From within the maelstrom of his destruction, a monstrous, skeletal visage began to emerge. In his place now stood a grotesque creature, its face a horrifying skull with empty sockets and a jaw filled with needle-like teeth. The masked man recognized it instantly, the true final boss of the DLC, an opponent of immense strength. He recalled the creature's details with perfect clarity. Its body was an amalgam of armor and tormented, skull-like faces. All of its statistics were insanely high, and its attack patterns were both varied and complicated. Furthermore, he knew the battle would be a grueling ordeal. It was split into 3 phases, each with more attack patterns than the last. Many of its attacks were instant kills, and the entire fight was filled with annoying gimmicks, making it the most difficult encounter in the entire game. He calmly explained that the monster's supposed invincibility only applied if one fought it conventionally, a course of action he had no intention of taking. Hearing this, Akatsuki voiced her uncertainty, questioning if victory was truly possible against such a powerful foe. He simply smiled, telling her to watch him, his confident demeanor a stark contrast to her doubt as he asked if he didn't look like he had everything under control. Her expression shifted, a flicker of trust replacing her fear as she agreed. Meanwhile, the monstrous anima of destruction bellowed its challenge, proclaiming that their deaths would usher out the Age of Light. It roared, demanding they listen to the stirring of its world. In response, the masked man declared that the creature wouldn't even get a turn. As he commanded them to watch closely, a brilliant light erupted from the ground at the monster's feet. The creature recoiled, crying out in shock and pain as the blinding flash enveloped. Enraged, the anima of destruction lashed out with tendrils of shadow, striking the masked man. It bellowed that these minor assaults were nothing compared to its ultimate power, but its words were punctuated by grunts of pain. The source of the light was a simple flash stone. Its holy attribute inflicted a stun status, an effect typically reserved for weak, low-level monsters. However, because the anima of destruction absorbed the power of darkness, it was uniquely vulnerable. The stun, however, was fleeting, lasting a mere 0.75 seconds, with an activation time of 0.4 seconds, making a continuous stun nearly impossible to maintain through combat. But this was precisely his strategy. He revealed that every single piece of his equipment was enchanted with attack speed effects. When combined with his class and skills, he gained a 200% bonus, allowing him to attack 3 times faster than normal. This incredible speed created just enough of a window for him to land an attack and immediately deploy another flash stone, creating a perfect, inescapable loop. The anima of destruction could only roar in disbelief, finding it impossible that such a ridiculous method of fighting could exist. He grinned, confidently declaring that there was indeed a way to win. He then revealed the sheer scale of his preparation, a total of 431 flash stones. The syndicate mastermind could only recoil in disbelief, stammering at the number. With a sharp gaze, the masked man challenged his foe to try and withstand the coming onslaught. The plan had been meticulously prepared. Akatsuki recalled her initial estimate, thinking she would only need around 300 of the stones. She smiled, realizing that Roma had exceeded all expectations in gathering them. Back in the throes of battle, the syndicate mastermind grunted, trapped by the relentless flashes of light. He snarled at his opponent not to get carried away. In a desperate move, he called upon the ancestral spirits, commanding them to crush his enemies. From the fractured ground, skeletal figures in dark robes began to rise, the summoned phantoms of past masterminds, known to be formidable foes in their own right. The masked man's expression tightened at the sight of the new arrivals, but his confidence didn't waver. Too bad, he declared. His words were not empty bravado. 2 more figures emerged from the shadows, their expressions calm and ready. The young man with messy hair smiled, announcing that they had a plan for these summoned phantoms as well. Within a crystalline cavern, a skeletal phantom in a tattered robe rises, calling upon the spirits of its ancestors to destroy its enemies. Facing the undead creature, the woman with the headband smiles, stating confidently that they have already accounted for this threat. Beside her, the messy-haired youth lets out a battle cry and charges forward. She remarks that this might be easier than expected, and her companion agrees, finding the fight to be fun. Their confidence stems from prior knowledge. They had been briefed on the timing and order in which the illusions of past leaders would be summoned from the scattered tombstones, allowing them to easily seal the phantoms away as they appear. Elsewhere in the trial, Silva peers battles his own monstrous opponents. One of the phantoms questions his methods, asking if he has any pride as a knight. Silva scoffs at the notion, declaring that pride is a joke. In battle, he insists the only thing that matters is winning. He shouts a challenge and charges down a dark, jagged corridor. He confronts the final illusion, a grotesque beast with multiple eyes. As it is struck down, the creature laments its defeat, unable to believe the power of the Hope bloodline is being extinguished. With a final, desperate roar, it is obliterated in a massive explosion of force. The dust settles, revealing the now empty, circular arena, its trial complete. Moments later, Silva wipes sweat from his brow, remarking on the grueling fight. The messy-haired youth expresses disbelief that they won so easily, but the woman with the headband simply smiles, vindicated. Silva interrupts, saying they should retrieve their prize before anything else. He spots the objective half buried in the ground. With its retrieval, he announces the mission is complete. The item is an ornate staff, identified as the one carried by the syndicate's mastermind. It is a communication device, used to issue orders to the organization's various divisions. With this staff, the entire syndicate can be controlled from shadows. Clutching the staff, Silva declares with a grin that the syndicate takeover is now complete. The woman with the headband looks on pensively, wondering what their next move will be. Below them, their allies stand ready, awaiting new orders. He stood silently for a moment, his expression unreadable, prompting both Mitsuki and Akatsuki to ask what was wrong. He explained that, as they must have heard earlier, the truth was that he used to be the captain of a national army unit. Before he could elaborate, Mitsuki cheerfully approached him, calling him Big Bro and asking where they were headed next. She announced she had a request for both him and Akatsuki. He was taken aback by her casual address, correcting her that he was a captain, not her brother. He then formally invited both her and Akatsuki to join his unit. Mitsuki, however, seemed confused by the distinction, insisting that Big Bro is Big Bro and calling him weird. He wondered aloud, flustered, if her brainwashing had truly worn off. Akatsuki, observing the interaction, suggested that it was more likely a mental defense mechanism kicking in, a concept she found novel. He considered another possibility. Perhaps Mitsuki simply liked him. Mitsuki explained that since breaking the brainwashing made it hard to face reality, her subconscious decided it was easier to see him as a big brother. Akatsuki, tired of the act, told Mitsuki not to act like she was leaving them, reminding her they still needed their strength. Then, with a knowing smile, she too called him Big Bro. The situation having taken a strange turn, he sighed in exasperation. Calling out to Mitsuki, he announced they were heading back. They arrived at the mouth of a dark cave. With a newfound resolve, he declared that he wouldn't go easy on his little sisters and warned them to be ready for what was coming. Both Mitsuki and Akatsuki cheered in enthusiastic agreement. Their excitement was palpable, for they now had a clear objective: to use the power of the syndicate. They knew that with this power, they could rapidly enhance the strength of all their allies, who now stood assembled and ready for the next phase of their plan. He looks forward with grim determination, declaring that this time, they will turn the enemy's power against them and proceed to the next stage. The path forward leads into a dark, rough-hewn tunnel that opens into a vast cavern carpeted with a strange, dense growth. Inside, as Kyle and Mia advance cautiously, Akatsuki suddenly calls for them to hold on. She complains about how annoying it is when people stop so abruptly. Kyle apologizes, but another soldier interjects, reminding Akatsuki that she was the one who ran from the barracks. Akatsuki defensively retorts that this wasn't how things were supposed to go. She then turns to Kyle, stating firmly that she never asked him to come after her, leaving him stunned and speechless. Mia steps between them, trying to de-escalate the situation. She insists that arguing won't solve anything and that they need to focus on escaping together. Though Kyle agrees, he mutters about her abrasive way of speaking, prompting Mia to plead for calm. Their bickering is abruptly silenced when a monstrous creature of black sludge emerges from a hole in the cavern wall. Mia realizes with dread that their voices have attracted it, putting them all in grave danger. Seeing the immediate threat, Kyle lowers his head and quickly apologizes, admitting his fault in the matter. He readies the spear given to him by the captain, stating he'll use it if necessary. Akatsuki scoffs at him, questioning if his skills can possibly match his impressive-looking weapon and his big talk. His patience finally snaps. Kyle grits his teeth in fury, shouting at Akatsuki for running her mouth again, while an exasperated Mia yells at them both to stop. He and his companions trudge through the oppressive darkness of a long, stone-lined passage. Akatsuki, her voice weary, wondered aloud how long they had been walking, sighing that it felt like an entire day had passed. Suddenly, his eyes caught a glimmer of light in the distance, and he urged the others to look. The glimmer grew into a bright, circular opening far above them, a stark contrast to the suffocating blackness of the deep shaft they were in. Upon reaching the top, they found their path blocked by a rough, earthen ceiling. With a grunt of effort, he pressed his hand against the barrier, testing its strength as Mia and Akatsuki watched. He poured all his strength into the effort, his muscles straining and his teeth clenched. With a determined cry, he resolved to push just a bit more, his fist digging into the soil and roots above. The barrier gave way, and he tumbled out onto the grassy floor of a sun-dappled forest. Lying on the ground, catching his breath, he stammered in relief that he had done it. He then leaped to his feet, throwing his arms wide in triumph and shouting with joy that he had finally made it out. Below, from the darkness of the hole, Mia expressed her disbelief that they had actually escaped. Akatsuki, however, beamed with relief, confirming that it was the surface and promising to lower a rope for them immediately. Mia, however, looked to her companion, urging Akatsuki to climb first and insisting that she herself was fine. After Mia had pulled herself out of the hole, Kyle, now resting on the ground, chided her for taking her time. She retorted that as a member of the military, she felt he, a civilian, should have been the one to ascend before her. Unimpressed, he told her that if she had time to argue, she had time to climb. Akatsuki, now also free, stretched joyfully, exclaiming how wonderful it was to see the sun after so long. Kyle turned to Mia with a smirk, teasingly asking if she had really allowed herself to be persuaded by a mere civilian. He brushes off the previous exchange, remarking that Leia had told him to go first anyway. From behind, Akatsuki announces that she will help too. As she runs to catch up, Mia tells her to stop, calling her Hawk. Kyle agrees with Mia that, more importantly, they need to figure out where they are. Their attention is drawn to the vast landscape before them, a dense forest overshadowed by the colossal, skeletal remains of a dragon. Seeing Akatsuki still on the ground, Kyle offers her a hand. She takes it, her expression unreadable as she quietly thanks him. She immediately winces, complaining that her hands are too sore to hold anything. Kyle looks over, a flicker of concern on his face. He asks to see her hands. When she questions why, he simply insists that she show him. Instead of showing her own hands, she takes his. Mia mutters in annoyance at the display. Akatsuki then begins an incantation, calling upon the eternal ring of space and time to summon past moments. A glowing sphere of energy forms between her palms as Kyle stares in shock, realizing he is witnessing magic. The light fades, revealing Kyle's hand is completely healed. Even an old scar has vanished. He asks if it was healing magic, and Akatsuki confirms it was something similar. She tells him not to thank her, as she was simply repaying him for pulling her up. Despite her act of kindness, Kyle mutters that she doesn't have a cute bone in her body. Mia overhears and asks what he said, but before they can argue, Akatsuki cuts in, telling them to stop fighting and focus on figuring out where they are. Her plea is cut short as a monstrous, multi-eyed creature with a gaping maw erupt from the very hole they just escaped. Mia screams a warning to the others to get away from the hole immediately. She stares in horror at the creature emerging from the tunnel. It's the same kind of beast from before, a planet WRM, but this one is far too large. Something is terribly wrong. Her shock gives way to disbelief as Kyle steels himself for a fight. He tells her they have no choice but to engage it, reminding her that as part of the 3rd Special Operations Unit, A monster like this is nothing. He orders her to get her spear ready. He charges forward, declaring he'll take the beast down himself. The creature lunges, its massive form hurtling towards him as Mia watches, paralyzed with fear. The beast's attack is too fast. It strikes, sending Mia tumbling to the ground. Kyle cries out her name in alarm. As she lies helpless, the monster bears down on her. But before it can strike, a powerful spell erupts from an unseen source. Magical chains and sigils burst from the ground, binding the creature in a field of stasis. The magic came from a woman in a white cloak. Mia looks at her, stunned, and utters a name in disbelief. Raya. The woman ignores her, shouting for Mia to run while she holds the beast back. She starts to comply, but a sudden movement catches her eye. She screams a warning to the woman in white. Raya, on your left. As the beast's massive tail whips around, breaking free from the magical restraints. The woman in white is frozen in place, her eyes wide with shock. Just as the tail is about to connect, a flash of light and a crackle of energy fills the air. A voice cries out a technique. Lightning blink. A man in a white mask appears in a blur of motion, intercepting the beast's tail with a powerful, electrified kick. The force of the impact shatters the ground as he shields the woman from the blow, much to Mia's astonishment. Before the confrontation can continue, another group arrives. A man in captain's armor, Silva appears, calls out, asking if they are all right. Kyle, surprised, identifies him as his captain. Silva tells them they can talk later, his focus shifting to the immediate threat before them. He stood with his allies, a united front against the colossal tunnel beast. As the creature let out a deafening roar, the masked man in white vaulted into the air, rallying them with a cry to take the monster down. In a sun-dappled forest, Kyle Transient and Mia Hawkeye stand guard over a group of terrified children as a monstrous, single-eyed beast looms before them. Watching from a hidden vantage point, the masked man in white assesses the situation. He declares the monster weak, confident that as members of the Special Forces, they can defeat it. Everything, he notes, is proceeding according to plan. From her position beside him, Roma fires points toward the chaos, exclaiming to Silva Pierce that children are being attacked and questioning why they aren't helping. The masked man calmly states that the right moment to intervene has not yet arrived, despite the clear danger. Roma is bewildered by his talk of a right moment, while Silva shudders, remarking on the creepiness of the creature's tentacles. The masked man quickly covers Roma's mouth, ordering her to be quiet. His mind races as he recognizes the scene before him. This is the final part of the Deserting Raya event from the game. He recalls that in the original story, Silva is the one who rescues Mia just in time. This moment is critical, as witnessing her abilities is what propels the narrative forward. He knows Mia is the reincarnation of a legendary sage, the only one capable of using dimensional magic. His internal calculations continue. Kyle saving Mia is an integral step to their future romance, and interfering at the wrong time could create complications. Silva, overhearing fragments, asks who these people are. The masked man explains that Kyle is Silva's subordinate and the future hero of the world, suggesting that earning points by saving him now would be a handsome investment. Silva is utterly baffled by the cold, outrageous logic. Suddenly, Mia cries out as a massive, intricate magic circle materializes, casting a spell. Stasis. The beast's tentacles freeze in place. Recognizing the spell, the masked man immediately shouts for Mitsuki and Akatsuki to move in. Roma looks on, startled by the abrupt command. But as he watches, he realizes with alarm that Kyle is much farther from Mia than he should be. He wonders if this is a side effect of the spear he gave Kyle, which, by making him stronger, altered his position in the fight. This is a disastrous deviation. The monster will reach Mia before Kyle can. Deciding he has no other choice, he prepares to act, invoking a skill. Lightning blink. In a blur of motion, he appears between Mia and the monster, deflecting its attack. He calls out, asking if they are all right. Kyle stares in shock, crying out, "Captain, why are you guys here?" The masked man cuts him off, saying they will talk later. Their priority is to defeat the beast. Mia can only stare, stunned at having been saved by a complete stranger. Internally, the masked man curses his intervention. Realizing this was a make-or-break scenario, he is now complicated. He resolved to figure out his next move after the battle. Just then, Mitsuki and Akatsuki arrive. Mitsuki confirms, "Got it." He turns to them, remarking dryly that they certainly enjoy putting their sisters to work. At that moment, as the monster lets out a piercing shriek, Silva Pierce launches himself into the air. He descends rapidly toward the beast, resolving to use the least amount of power necessary to end this. He brings his blade down with devastating force, roaring the name of his attack, Judgment. The impact shatters the ground, engulfing the shrieking monster in a wave of raw power. His powerful attack connects, sending a shockwave through the area. The force of the blow throws him, Akatsuki, and Mitsuki back as the tunnel beast reels from the impact. Despite the devastating hit, the beast remains standing, its form grotesquely damaged, but not destroyed. Kyle stares in disbelief at its resilience. From the ground, Akatsuki calls out to him, identifying him as the brown-red guy with the spear and instructing him to prepare for the final strike. He struggles to his feet, his body aching from the earlier chaos. The masked man watches from a distance, satisfied that at least this part of the event went well, allowing Kyle to gain some experience points without him stealing them all. His attention, however, is drawn to Akatsuki, whose face is flushed, a detail he finds perplexing. Meanwhile, Kyle rushes over to Mia, anxiously checking if she is all right. She confirms she is fine, explaining that Raya saved her. The masked man recognizes this moment instantly. This is supposed to be the pivotal scene where Raya opens up to Kyle. She stammers that she's completely fine. Kyle then turns to the masked man, whom he still believes to be Raya, and begins to thank him for saving Mia. A wave of panic washes over the masked man. This is a disaster. He frantically wonders how he can possibly salvage the original storyline from this deviation. She awkwardly accepts Kyle's gratitude before asking who the masked man is. Her flustered reaction puzzles him. Before he can process it, Silva Pierce interjects, admonishing Akatsuki for her behavior and stating he didn't save her for her own benefit. Mitsuki steps in to formally introduce him as Captain Silva Pierce of the 3rd Special Task Force. He formally thanks the captain for the timely rescue, then apologizes for breaking the force's rules, stating he is ready to accept any punishment. Silva dismisses the apology for now, telling him they will address the matter back at the barracks. His gaze, however, shifts intently toward Akatsuki. He addresses her directly, stating that while he doesn't understand why she ran away, he requires her to return to the barracks so he can ask about her magic. The masked man inwardly sighs at the familiar, game-like progression of the conversation. To his surprise, Akatsuki enthusiastically agrees, promising to go anywhere and answer all of his questions. Her immediate and total compliance leaves Silva momentarily speechless. A short distance away, Kyle offers a weary Mia his shoulder for support. Watching them, Roma comments to Mitsuki on what a good couple they make. Mitsuki, however, gestures toward the other pair, questioning the strange look on Silva's face. She dismisses it with a laugh, telling Mitsuki to go call for Roma and the horse as they are headed to the capital next. Mitsuki agrees and sets off. As Akatsuki quietly apologizes to Silva, the masked man watches them, his mind racing. He knows he must find a way to correct this deviation in the story once they're all back at the barracks. He is caught off guard when Akatsuki shyly asks what she should call him, suggesting either Ilvis-san or Captain. Seeing her flustered state, he replies with a grin that either is fine. She decides to stick with Captain for now, letting out a small, happy laugh. Despite her cheerfulness, his mind seethes with frustration. This is all wrong. Akatsuki was never supposed to be this kind of character, and her maidenly gaze, which should have been directed at Kyle, has been fixed solely on him. He realizes with dawning horror what he has done. He has stolen the hero's rightful place. Meanwhile, in an office within the barracks, the real Silva Pierce addresses Kyle transient. He begins by stating that the most important thing is that Kyle is safe. However, he sternly adds that under the circumstances, he cannot praise Kyle for breaking the rules and acting alone, warning that such a mistake could have caused irreparable damage. He questions why Kyle didn't at least report to Natalya. He explains that for some reason, he felt he had to act that way to prevent anyone from pursuing them immediately. Silva presses the issue, asking if Kyle truly believed it was the right thing to do, even if it meant breaking their rules. With unwavering conviction, Kyle confirms that he did. Hearing his subordinate's firm response, Silva's expression softens slightly. He concedes that it can't be helped, then he rises from his desk, acknowledging that all's well that ends well, but reminds Kyle that he risked 2 people's lives. He adds that if Kyle hadn't chased after Raya, she might have ended up in even greater trouble. He continues his counsel, telling Kyle that the danger only arose because he wasn't strong enough. If he wants to feel shame, it should be for breaking the rules, not for following his convictions. Silva declares that one should never be ashamed of doing what they believe is right, even if the entire world, the law, or even the prophecies of the eternal tree stand against them. His advice culminates in a powerful directive. If Kyle ever finds himself in a similar situation, he must listen to his own heart above all else. Of course, he must also be prepared to take responsibility for the consequences. This, Silva concludes, is all he has to say as one man to another. Deeply moved, Kyle shouts his understanding, vowing to remember the lesson. With the lesson imparted, Silva's tone shifts back to that of a captain delivering orders. As punishment for breaking the rules and endangering his comrades, Kyle is assigned to cleaning duty. Furthermore, starting the next day, he will undergo a special training course designed to make his life hell. Kyle accepts the punishment without complaint and is formally dismissed. Elsewhere, the disguised observer reflects on the exchange. He knows Silva's words are necessary and will be very important for Kyle's future, but finds acting out these game-like scenes to be incredibly tense. His thoughts are interrupted as Akatsuki appears in the doorway, asking for a moment of his time. He dismissively suggests she ask Natalya if she needs something, but Akatsuki clarifies that her request is of a different nature. He finds himself in a delicate situation. Akatsuki, blushing slightly, presents 2 different uniform styles and asks which one he, as her captain, likes best. The question sounds innocent, but he immediately recognizes it as a minefield, feeling that there's no significant difference between the 2 options. His mind races with the catastrophic possibilities. If he gives the wrong answer and sours her mood, he fears the entire world could be at risk. As he hesitates, Akatsuki eagerly declares that his opinion is the only one that matters. Just then, a calm voice cuts in, asking for a moment of their time. The interruption comes from a striking woman in elaborate black and white robes. She addresses him directly, feigning surprise at his presence in her office and playfully asking if he's there to invite her on a date. Before he can react, she dismisses the notion, stating she has simply come to collect a report on the recent fall disaster. This woman is no ordinary official. She is known as the priestess of the eternal tree, the sole individual apart from the God King to receive prophecies directly from it. He understands that this pious and professional demeanor is merely one side of her, a carefully constructed mask. Her true name is Nenia, and with that name comes a chilling revelation. A sinister smile spreads across her face, betraying the immense power and dark purpose hidden beneath her serene exterior. She's the final boss of the game. The priestess stands in contemplative silence, her gaze fixed forward with an unreadable, almost vacant expression. He notices her intense stare and asks with a slight, knowing smirk if there is something unusual on his face. He continues the conversation casually, suggesting they share a meal at a quiet spot he knows that serves excellent food and drinks. As they stand together on the balcony, he admits he was simply struck by how beautiful she always looks, his tone light and charming. Despite his easy demeanor, he is acutely aware that she is the final boss, and that defeating her here and now would solve nothing. She responds with a gentle, soft smile, agreeing to his invitation if the opportunity ever presents itself in the future. Her immortality is a heavy, dark burden, sustained by the forbidden technique known as bestow eternity. This power grants eternal youth and life by sacrificing the soul of the youngest member of the bloodline. Even if her head were severed or her heart pierced, she would remain among the living for millions of years. He decides that leaving her be for the moment is the most prudent course of action. As he prepares to take his leave, he mentions encountering a young girl in the hallway, whom she identifies as Raya Esperanza. He then brings up the subject of her little sisters who have recently joined their ranks, piquing her interest. He explains that they took in a girl with no family during their last mission, providing her with a place to belong for the time being. He lets out a hearty laugh, clarifying that they are actually twins who grew up in separate homes, but were reunited by a stroke of luck. Because they refused to be separated again, he allowed them both to join the force. He assures her that their skills are beyond reproach and that no favoritism was involved in their recruitment, speaking of Akatsuki and Mitsuki with absolute confidence. She encourages him to maintain his excellent work as captain, noting that the influx of new personnel is vital as the fault continues to expand. Together, they look toward a distant horizon, hoping for a day when eternal peace might finally be achieved. She remains composed as the captain acknowledges her reliability, noting that the report seems intact before taking her leave to handle some paperwork. Meanwhile, Silva Pierce is startled by another visitor at his door, only to find Natalya reporting in with a stack of documents he had previously signed off on. He looks over the papers, confused by her concern, as she admits that while she doesn't suspect him of anything, some of the decisions recorded in the documents seem strange. She points out specific examples, like the rejection of Tanis's request for equipment reparations after a mission, noting that such standard applications are usually approved without a second thought. Because of this discrepancy, she wonders if she simply misunderstood the situation, while Silva maintains that equipment repair is definitely a necessity. Her gaze remains fixed on the papers, explaining that there were so many oddities she thought he might have had a secret plan, otherwise she would have just fixed the minor mistakes herself. As they look closer at the markings, Silva points out that Tanis's request is clearly approved, but Natalya is certain she remembers most of these being rejected. Seeing her confusion, he asks if she's simply exhausted from overtraining, noting that this lack of focus isn't like her at all. Suddenly, a realization hits her like a physical blow as she looks at the symbols again, while he continues to insist that the document clearly shows a rejection. He lets out a frustrated cry as the weight of the error sinks in, while she calmly explains the root of the confusion. In their current system, an X denotes a positive response, whereas a circle signifies a rejection. The chronicles of this world, known to some as Yoi, were unique in their global reach, existing as a single, unified edition across all lands. Beyond these global distributions, the language settings were automated, though the underlying systems allowed for shifts between the common tongue and more obscure dialects like Greenlandic. Back in the administrative office, she looks down at her companion, noting that the documents he thought were finished days ago are still piled up, attributing his confusion to travel fatigue. He leans back, utterly defeated, still processing that he had the symbols for confirmation and cancellation reversed. Despite his exhaustion, she insists with a bright, terrifying smile that he must finish all the paperwork by the end of the day. When he tries to laugh it off as a joke, her expression shifts into a fierce, intimidating glare, making it clear she is dead serious. She storms off, declaring that she will demand a proper explanation later and that he better be prepared. Left alone with the daunting stack of papers, he reflects on how a circle usually means yes and an X means no, lamenting the bizarre system they've been working under. Later, he trudges through the halls of the Army's Special Force headquarters, his eyes heavy with sleep after pulling an all-nighter to fix the administrative mess. His weary walk is interrupted by a familiar voice calling out his name. He stops, his attention caught by the impressive status screens of the individuals approaching him, noting their high levels and powerful attributes. The newcomers reveal themselves to be a cheerful young man in gleaming armor and a woman with sharp glasses and a fur-lined collar. He is surprised to see them there. The woman, Ceres Kobold, captain of the 4th Special Task Force, chides him for his blunt reaction after they went out of their way to see him. Beside her, Regulus Aslashin, captain of the 1st Special Task Force, greets his senior warmly, praising his recent exploits in the capital. When he asks what brings the two captains there, Ceres clings to Regulus's arm with a mischievous grin, claiming they are on a lovey-dovey date, much to the shock of their exhausted colleague. He stands there, overwhelmed by the chaotic energy of his fellow captains. Regulus frantically tries to clarify that their meeting was strictly for joint training, but Ceres only fuels the fire, playfully suggesting she's staking her claim on the future commander while she has the chance. Natalya, meanwhile, remains completely unbothered by the potential scandal. Turning his attention to Ceres, Regulus offers a sincere promise that she will never have to face loneliness. However, she dismisses his earnestness with a smirk, urging him to abandon his fixation on the mean Silva and choose her instead. The rejection hits home, leaving the young captain visibly dejected. Despite his admiration for her, he admits that his heart and loyalty are firmly set on his senior, Silva. In a sudden, dramatic display of affection, he leans in close to his mentor, pleading to be held and comforted just as he once was. Silva can only stare back in wide-eyed horror, cold sweat beading on his forehead as the situation spirals into absurdity. Seeing the display, Ceres finally calls for an end to the nonsense, though she quickly pivots to inviting them all out for drinks after their next official gathering. Silva is left utterly drained, wondering if anything ever truly makes sense to these people. Their banter is violently cut short by a thunderous roar, demanding to know why they are making such a pathetic ruckus. The sudden intrusion sends a jolt of alarm through the group, their playful bickering instantly silenced. The source of the outburst is Wilm Brown, the commander of the Special Task Force, who looms over them with a look of pure disdain. The captains immediately scramble to offer awkward greetings, with Ceres desperately trying to laugh off the tension while the commander glares at them with narrowed eyes. He doesn't hold back his contempt, sneering at them as mere whelps and mercenary upstarts who could never hope to comprehend his supposed greatness. With a sharp command to know their place, he asserts his authority over the group, his ego as massive as his physical presence. This man's position, however, is built on a foundation of nepotism rather than merit. As the son of the president of the powerful Brown Company, he secured his rank through dirty tricks and corporate influence. He possesses no true military accomplishments, having never even issued a legitimate order on the battlefield. Instead of leading, his daily routine involves being pampered by subordinates and receiving lavish treatment from those seeking to secure lucrative military contracts with his family's business. He is a man who thrives on the perks of a rank he never truly earned. He continues his verbal assault, mocking Silva peers for still being alive and labeling him the perfect example of a corrupt officer. Silva, however, takes the insult in stride, dryly noting that his only real talent is his stubborn refusal to die. He lets out a mocking laugh, openly wishing that Silva had simply perished in a ditch to save him the trouble of dealing with him. This blatant disrespect finally pushes Regulus to shout a protest, telling the commander he is crossing a line. He snaps back with a sneer, ordering them to stop wasting time and go train their useless soldiers instead. In his haste to dismiss them, he accidentally fumbles a document, which slips from his grasp. He barks a sharp warning when the young captain tries to point out the mistake, telling them not to touch his belongings with their filthy commoner hands before turning to leave. As he storms away, a heavy silence falls over the group until Ceres breaks it, observing that Silva has certainly matured. She remarks that the Silva of the past would have likely torn the man apart for such words. Her observation triggers a brief recollection of their younger days, a time when Silva was a notorious hooligan and Ceres was already by his side. Her words cause Silva to try and hush her, clearly uncomfortable with his past being brought up so publicly, while Regulus remains baffled, wondering aloud how a man like Wilm could ever reach such a high rank. Their conversation is cut short by Ceres, who is too irritated to care about the past, her mood completely soured by the encounter with the pig bastard. She abruptly cancels their plans for drinks, needing a rain check. She announces her departure with a final, sharp wave, eager to put as much distance between herself and the recent unpleasantness as possible. Her departure leaves Silva alone with his thoughts, reflecting on the strange turn the day has taken and deciding that he, too, should be moving on. He moves away from the group, his mind already on the next phase of his plan. Looking down at the intricate device in his hand, he acknowledges that thanks to the others, he has finally secured what he needed to move forward. Entering a quiet hallway, he is greeted by the sight of a young woman with twin braids, who is currently relegated to domestic chores. She looks up from her sweeping, her frustration at being a mere housekeeper vanishing as she calls out to him. She quickly voices her grievances, pleading to be given a role in logistics rather than being treated like a maid. He patiently explains the necessity of their current arrangement, noting that a sudden influx of new recruits would only draw unwanted attention to their squad. He leans in, promising her that this period of restriction is only temporary and that she will soon have the freedom she desires. He catches her off guard by declaring that she is, in fact, his most trusted right hand. Seeing her surprise, he transitions to the matter at hand, informing her that he has a specialized assignment ready for her. She perks up instantly, her earlier complaints forgotten as she eagerly asks for details, hoping it involves more than just tidying the barracks. He clarifies that her new role will involve surveillance, requiring her to use specific equipment to track a high-profile target. He reveals a collection of specialized gadgets laid out on a table, introducing them as the legendary tools of the trade. When she points out the discrepancy in the number of items, he simply brushes it off, telling her not to get bogged down in the details. Her curiosity piqued. She asks for the identity of the person she is meant to shadow. His gaze hardens as he prepares to reveal the name of their mark. He identifies the target as Commander Wilm Brown, a revelation that leaves her reeling at the audacity of spying on such a high-ranking official. He justifies the move by describing the commander as a significant obstacle that must be removed for the sake of their larger goals. He continues his cold calculation, reasoning that if the commander were to simply vanish, a far more capable individual would surely take his place. Without the man's insatiable greed clogging the gears of progress, the entire task force would finally receive the superior equipment and missions they deserve, creating a situation where everyone, except the commander, wins. Despite his confidence, his companion voices a lingering concern, questioning if uncovering incriminating evidence against such a high-ranking official will truly be as simple as he suggests. He merely smiles, comparing the commander's corruption to an oil field. Once they begin to dig, even slightly, the filth will gush out from every corner, making the task of gathering proof effortless. She finds the revelation unsettling, struggling to reconcile the idea that someone so morally bankrupt could ascend to such a position of power within the military. To her, the very existence of such a leader feels like a strange and disturbing anomaly in the world she thought she knew. Her focus shifts as she peers through the specialized lens of one of the spy gadgets, marveling at the sophisticated technology found within the big city. The intricate mechanisms of the tool reflect in her wide, curious eyes, momentarily distracting her from the gravity of the mission. Seeing her fascination, he asks if she fully understands the function of each device, instructing her to use them to unearth the commander's secrets. She responds with an enthusiastic salute, her excitement for the task outweighing any lingering nerves as she prepares to depart, while he offers a final, stern warning to treat the mission with the utmost care. As she heads out, his true objective remains clear. The removal of the incompetent commander is merely the first step. If she can successfully complete this assignment, he will finally be able to advance his grander ambitions to the next stage, his gaze fixed on a future he is determined to shape. Silva Pierce stands alone, hoping his plan unfolds as intended. He shakes off his worries, knowing there's no point in dwelling on them now. He approaches a training ground where a group of recruits is being put through their paces. He calls out to them, observing the scene with a mix of amusement and authority. Roma and her twin sister lead the drills, their voices sharp and unrelenting as they demand more effort from the exhausted man. They enforce the 3rd Special Task Force's core belief in meritocracy, where skill is the only currency that matters, regardless of age or tenure. The twins strike a mocking pose, their confidence bordering on arrogance as they look down upon the struggling soldiers. They continue to taunt a particularly large recruit who grunts in frustration, reminding him that he was bested by cute little girls. Their relentless goading continues as they call the men weaklings, while the recruit seethes, realizing these two are the captain's younger sisters. Natalya of Norfolk arrives on the scene, her eyes narrowing as she takes in the unconventional training methods and the twins' dominance. She turns to Silva, expressing her shock at the revelation that he has sisters, while he simply smiles at their proven prowess. She looks on with a new resolve, admitting to herself that she is keenly aware of her own shortcomings and the long journey ahead. She stands before her captain, bewildered by his sudden critique of her basic training routine. When he demands she define her role as vice captain, she begins a formal recitation of her duties, only to be cut off by his thunderous roar of disapproval. Because of her narrow perspective, he bellows that she is still operating at a novice level, shocking her with the assertion that her true purpose on the battlefield is not merely to lead, but to be a dancer. Following this startling declaration, he leans in close, his gaze intense as he challenges her to explain the fundamental role of a dancer within the chaos of combat. In response, she draws upon her studies, explaining that a dancer's duty is to perform a prayerful ritual for the gods, gathering natural magic power to then redistribute it among their comrades. While he acknowledges that she has done her research and understands the concept of harmonizing with nature, he remains unconvinced by her practical application. He then looms over her, his voice dripping with skepticism as he questions whether she truly possesses a grasp of the divine essence she speaks of. As the tension peaks, he scoffs at her previous efforts, demanding to know if she honestly believes the gods will be satisfied by the monotonous hip movements of her pathetic squats. startled by his bluntness. She can only listen in silence as he prepares to reveal the single most important secret to achieving martial and spiritual perfection. To illustrate his point, he demonstrates a powerful stance, roaring that the key to every movement, whether swinging a sword or thrusting a spear, is the twist of the body. Finally, the truth of his words resonates within her, and she gasps in sudden realization, acknowledging that the rotation of the hips is indeed the vital center of all power. She listens as the commander declares it is time to begin, insisting that the theory must now be put into practice. He reiterates that the secret to a divine dance lies in the rotation of the hips, a fundamental step that will surely please the gods. Following his lead, she attempts to replicate the motion, tentatively asking if her form is correct as she begins to move. She focuses on the instruction, trying to incorporate the twist he described into her stiff movements. He immediately cuts her off, frustrated that her efforts are nothing more than the same rigid squat she performed earlier. He barks at her to add a proper twist, refusing to accept such a lackluster display that lacks the necessary fluidity. The criticism intensifies as he claims that even the gods would find her current performance more boring than watching insects mate. He demands more energy and passion, his voice rising with a fervor that borders on desperation as he tries to spark a change in her. In response to his shouting, she pushes herself further, questioning if this increased intensity is what he desires. He remains unsatisfied, however, roaring for even more heat and passion to be infused into every single movement she makes. He urges her to cast aside her shyness and surrender to her hidden desires, using himself as an example of how to project such raw emotion. She can only stare in bewilderment, struggling to grasp the concept of acting passionately in the middle of a training session. A sudden shock of embarrassment washes over her as he suggests she imagine the feeling of being held by the man she loves. She blushes furiously, her mind racing with the realization that he is completely oblivious to the fact that he is the very man she is thinking of. Sensing her hesitation, he briefly falters before doubling down, telling her to use her imagination if she lacks the actual experience. He insists there are no excuses for a lack of creative visualization, demanding she find that spark within her mind. He continues his loud lecture, shouting about the longing for another's warmth, completely oblivious to the emotional turmoil he is causing. She can only look down, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words and her own mounting embarrassment at the situation. Finally, she manages a movement that captures the essence he was looking for, prompting a shout of success from her mentor. He observes with satisfaction that the divine eyes are finally turning toward her, pleased that she has at last found the right rhythm and passion. She receives a sharp reprimand for her stiff movements, as her mentor bellows for her to loosen her posture and move with more fluidity. Natalya can only offer a sheepish apology, realizing she had let her focus slip during the intense session. Having finished with her, the commander stands tall before the assembled squad, his presence commanding absolute silence and respect. He then shifts his piercing gaze toward the exhausted youth nearby, informing him that his own ordeal is far from over. Kyle, drenched in sweat and gasping for air, can barely process the command. The veteran warrior then drops a bombshell, declaring that they will engage in an immediate mock battle. The announcement leaves the young recruit reeling with shock, his eyes wide with disbelief. He feels his heart hammer against his ribs, certain that his body has already reached its breaking point and that another bout might actually be the end of him. Without a moment's hesitation, the commander lunges forward, his practice weapon a blur as he explains that this grueling session is also a formal punishment for violating squad regulations. The boy is sent sprawling to the dirt, groaning in agony as his mentor looms over him, warning that he has no intention of holding back despite the obvious gap in their abilities. As the relentless assault continues, the seasoned knight calculates the benefits of this struggle, knowing that facing a level 62 opponent will grant the boy massive experience gains, even if he is soundly defeated. His objective is clear. He must push the recruit to reach level 30 before a looming deadline, even though the efficiency of such training will plummet once the boy grows stronger. The exhausted recruit lies crumpled on the ground, barely able to muster a groan of pain as the weight of the training session takes its toll. He gritted his teeth, fueled by a stubborn resolve. Despite the exhaustion weighing on his limbs, he felt he couldn't stop now, not when the captain was dedicating so much effort to his growth. Because of this drive, he insisted he was ready for more, but Silva held up a hand, calling for a halt. The older man admitted that while he was a hard taskmaster, he had no desire to continue a one-sided beating while being watched by a pair of young women. As if on cue, Mia and Natalya approached the training grounds, with Mia carrying a tray of freshly prepared rice balls. Kyle looked up in surprise, his focus momentarily broken by their unexpected arrival. In response to his confusion, Mia shyly explained that she had heard they were still training and thought they might be hungry. Silva couldn't help but chuckle, teasingly suggesting that she simply didn't want to see her friend looking battered and unrefined. Ignoring the captain's jab, she stepped closer and offered the snacks, asking if she was interrupting their session. Kyle could only stare, caught off guard by her thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, Natalya turned her attention towards Silva, addressing him with a quiet respect. She held out the remaining food, offering him a share of what they had brought. The captain seemed momentarily flustered, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple as he looked at the offering. Natalya remained composed, simply waiting for him to accept the gesture. After a brief hesitation, he reached out, admitting that he would gratefully accept the meal. His usual bravado seemed to soften in the face of her calm persistence. Moments later, Kyle took a bite and was immediately struck by the flavor, praising the quality of the food. Mia beamed with relief, her anxiety melting away at his genuine appreciation. As the group settled down to eat together, the conversation turned to the meal's preparation. Mia revealed that the filling was a special fish recipe she had learned from the vice director, prompting Silva to remark that she had always possessed a natural talent for cooking. He watches the two of them, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. The sight of their easy rapport is beginning to grate on his nerves, and he mutters that because of them, he'll have to make some adjustments to the training plan. As the captain turns away, the young man behind him sees an opportunity. He realizes that if he can leverage this tension and combine it with his current skills, he might just gain the upper hand. Before the session can officially resume, he steps forward, his hand gripping his practice weapon. He calls out to the captain, urgently requesting just one more round to prove himself. The request causes the armored commander to pause, but his focus shifts elsewhere. He raises a hand, signaling a halt, and states that he actually has something he needs to discuss with Mia Hawkeye first, leaving her stammering in confusion. He turns fully toward her, his expression uncharacteristically solemn as he adjusts his gloves. Without preamble, he asks if she would be willing to go on a date with him this coming weekend. The question hangs in the air, met with a wall of stunned silence. Mia's face flushes as her eyes go wide with disbelief, while the others nearby can only stare in absolute shock at the captain's sudden and direct proposal. He stands before the captain, who is visibly bewildered by the sudden request. The knight questions what has come over the group, specifically why the young man would suddenly ask Mia out on a date, wondering if a specific reason is even necessary to pursue such a beautiful woman. The captain continues his critique, comparing the girl to formidable figures like Vice Captain Natalya or Captain Ceres. To him, she is little more than a child, and he suggests that there are far more suitable women for someone of the young man's standing, even if his harsh words are meant to protect her in his own twisted way. Despite his harsh words, the knight admits there is a certain charm in her timid and earnest nature. He notes that such a quality is rare, yet he remains skeptical of the boy's sudden, out-of-the-blue proposal, pointing out that he has never shown any interest like this before. He acknowledges that the choice ultimately rests with her, but insists that his intervention is a necessary correction. His gaze is sharp, emphasizing that his involvement is due to the young man's own lack of initiative until now. A new proposition is put forward, a match to settle the matter. The captain challenges the youth to a mock battle, declaring that if he can land even a single hit within the next 2 weeks, he will earn the right to take her on a date, considering it a fair test of his resolve. The suggestion leaves the young woman stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief as she looks between the two men. The boy hesitates, processing the gravity of the challenge while the captain maintains his confident, almost taunting grin, urging him to accept the terms. Deep down, the knight knows of the boy's unique talent for growth through adversity. He reasons that pushing the youth to his absolute physical and mental limits is the most efficient way to sharpen his skills, even if the risk of failure is high and his methods seem cruel to others. Sensing his resolve, she offers a quiet word of encouragement, expressing her unwavering belief in his ability to succeed. This support only fuels the captain's competitive fire, as he dares the boy to bring everything he has, regardless of the methods used. With a roar of determination, the young man accepts the terms of the duel. He stands tall, his spirit ignited by the high stakes of the upcoming confrontation, fully aware that the battle for her heart has truly begun. The grueling preparation begins immediately, with the first and second days marked by relentless training and painful lessons. He is pushed to the brink, enduring strike after strike and physical exhaustion in his desperate pursuit of victory. He continues to endure the grueling training as the third day arrives, his body battered by the relentless assault. Continuing his struggle into the fourth day, the intensity only increases. Regulus and his subordinates toss the young man and his companion around like ragdolls, mocking their hopeless weakness and lack of progress. Collapsed on the dirt and gasping for air, the exhausted warrior is met with Regulus's scornful gaze as the captain asks if he's ready to quit, but he stubbornly insists he can keep going despite the obvious toll on his body. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he listens as Regulus silently concludes that at this rate, landing even a single blow within the remaining 10 days will be an impossible feat. While the captain lost himself in a vivid fantasy of an elaborate date with Mia, complete with fancy dinners and romantic plays, the young trainee remained focused on his singular goal, vowing to overcome the odds. Observing his student closely, Regulus acknowledges that while the boy's physical stamina is severely lacking, his mental resilience is truly remarkable. The captain realizes that standard training exercises have reached their limit, and that to truly grow, the boy must face the life-and-death stakes of a real battlefield, even if it means facing monstrous threats. Looking toward the distant, frozen peaks of a treacherous mountain range, the commander decides that the only way forward is to plunge his subordinate into a literal living hell. He reiterates the terms of their wager with a confident smirk, reminding the boy that he has exactly 2 weeks to land just 1 hit to claim victory. Nearby, Mia finally realizes the implications of the deal, asking with a look of pure bewilderment if she is actually required to go on this date, to which Regulus gives a definitive, unwavering confirmation. He watches as the young man pushes himself to the brink of exhaustion, questioning the source of such relentless drive. Kyle's mind is a whirlwind of self-doubt, wondering why he strives so hard when the gap between him and the captain seems insurmountable. He recalls the captain's effortless charm and experience, feeling like a mere shadow in comparison. His thoughts drift back a decade to the moment it all began. In the memory, a group of cruel children corners a young girl, hurling insults and demanding the half-elf leave their sight. The young boy, seeing the injustice, shouts for them to stop, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and righteous indignation. As the bullies flee, the young girl remains on the ground, tears streaming down her face, while the boy reaches out a hand to comfort her. With a determined smile, he promises her that she has nothing to worry about, vowing to be her protector from that day forward. Returning to the present, the man wipes the sweat from his brow, a bitter smile playing on his lips as he acknowledges the pathetic nature of his current strength compared to that childhood oath. He lunges forward in a mock battle, his movements sharp but lacking the refined power of his mentor, grunting with the effort of every strike. The simulated combat is brutal, and he finds himself thrown back, realizing that even this mental projection of his rival is more than he can handle. He stands panting, the weight of his inadequacy pressing down on him as he admits that, in his current state, he doesn't stand a ghost of chance. Suddenly, a dark, intrusive thought claws at his mind, a desperate hunger for power that leaves him wide-eyed and trembling as he realizes he must surpass the captain at any cost. He is suddenly confronted by a mysterious figure draped in a dark hood and a white mask. The stranger asks if he hungers for the power to defeat his rival, but he quickly sees through the clumsy disguise, recognizing the girl as the captain's younger sister. Despite her attempts to maintain an air of mystery and vanish into the shadows, he remains entirely unconvinced, questioning who she really is as she fumbles her dramatic exit. He flatly points out that her voice and stature are unmistakable, though she stubbornly insists he is mistaken, trying to keep the charade alive. Frustrated by his persistence and her own inability to stay in character, she finally snaps, letting out a cry of pure annoyance as her carefully constructed persona crumbles. Now fully revealed, Akatsuki complains that he ruined the atmosphere she worked so hard to create, even going as far as borrowing a costume from Itsuki. He, however, is more concerned with his training, asking what she wants so he can get back to his work. She scoffs at his efforts, dismissively labeling his intense practice as nothing more than clumsy dancing. She notes his desperate desire for strength, calling it a typical trait for a boy like him. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she commands him to follow, promising to show him something worthwhile. Reluctantly, he agrees to go along, curious despite himself. They soon find themselves in a secluded spot behind a building. He feels a wave of unease, questioning why she would lead him to such a private and isolated location. Her tone shifts to one of grim warning as she tells him that what comes next will be pure hardship, a literal living hell that will test his very limits. Suddenly, a swirling vortex of dark energy erupts before them. While he panics, thinking it's a dangerous rift, she calmly explains that it is a portal, a far more sophisticated and controlled phenomenon than the barbaric rifts he knows. She explains that the swirling vortex is a marvel of spatial transfer technology, a sophisticated application of the very principles that govern rifts. When he expresses disbelief at such magic, she cuts through his hesitation, demanding to know if his desire for strength is genuine or merely talk. Seeing his confusion, she sighs, calling him dense, and questioning if such a slow-witted man could truly be the hero destined to save their world. He can only stammer in response to her blunt assessment, caught off guard by her lack of faith. A playful, almost predatory smile crosses her face as she tells him that some things must be experienced firsthand. She promises that what lies beyond offers growth that centuries of conventional training could never provide, urging him to see for himself. Without further warning, she heaves a massive, fully loaded rucksack toward him. He barely catches the heavy gear, grunting under the unexpected weight of the supplies as he wonders what he's supposed to do with all of it. When Kyle protests that the pack is far too large for bare minimum supplies, she ignores his complaints entirely. With a firm shove, she sends him stumbling toward the shimmering event horizon of the portal, telling him not to worry about the details. He vanishes into the swirling darkness with a startled cry, leaving her alone in the quiet room. She watches the portal stabilize, musing to herself about how he works his little sister too hard, a cryptic comment on their shared burden. As the transition takes hold, a memory flashes through his mind, a sharp-featured young man with a fierce gaze, calling out to his elder brother with a mixture of challenge and respect. The vision shatters as he slams into a bank of freezing powder. The impact knocks the wind from his lungs, leaving him gasping in the sudden, biting cold of an unknown land. Shivering violently, Kyle struggles to his feet amidst a desolate, snow-covered landscape. The transition was instantaneous, replacing the warmth of the training hall with a sub-zero wilderness that threatens to numb his very bones. His breath hitches as a massive, dark silhouette rises from the snow nearby. A low growl rumbles through the air, and he realizes with a jolt of terror that he is not alone in this frozen hell. He stares wide-eyed, his breath hitching in the frigid air as he comes face-to-face with the reality of his situation, leaving him momentarily speechless. Looking out over the vast, desolate expanse of snow and ice, he finds himself completely alone in an unfamiliar mountain range with only his rucksack, wondering where he has been sent. Wilm Brown's face is contorted with rage as he slams a newspaper onto the table, his voice booming through the room. He demands to know why he has been summoned to such a place, his eyes wide with indignation as he confronts his subordinate. The reason for his fury lies in the bold headlines of the morning papers, which scream of sexual harassment by superior officers and deep-seated corruption within the military high command. The articles detail favors granted to specific contractors in exchange for lavish entertainment, painting a damning picture of the leadership. He turns his trembling gaze towards Silva Pierce, sweating profusely as he questions who could possibly be behind such baseless, fabricated nonsense. Silva remains composed, his expression unreadable as he observes the commander's breakdown. The young knight maintains a stoic facade, though his mind is racing with the complexity of the situation. He knows that in this game of power, ideas and information are his most potent weapons. This chaos was no accident. Earlier, he had contacted the mastermind of the syndicate to coordinate the leak. He had ensured that every piece of incriminating information reached the hands of the press, framing the narrative to suit his own ends and dismantle his rivals. Back in the present, the commander's denial reaches a fever pitch as he screams that every word in the papers is a lie. In a fit of desperate rage, he lashes out at his subordinate, calling him a useless mutt and demanding an end to the accusations. He later stands alone by a window, watching the world outside while savoring a quiet moment of triumph. Everything is proceeding according to his design, and he knows it is only a matter of time before Wilm's influence finally crumbles. While these political machinations unfold in the heart of the city, the path of others leads elsewhere. At the same time these scandals broke, Ka was dispatched far away to the harsh, unforgiving environment of the snowy mountains. Meanwhile, the young woman with the braided hair finds herself caught in the wake of these schemes, her frustration mounting. She realizes she has been used as a pawn in a much larger game, and despite her efforts, she has yet to see any tangible results from her mission. She stood alone, contemplating the storm of scandals that had recently engulfed the commander. With the press in a frenzy and newspapers buzzing with corruption allegations, she knew she wasn't the only one digging for the truth among the underlings. Peering through her monocular, she realized this mission was more than just an investigation. It was a test to see who was the best among them. A golden opportunity had finally presented itself, and she was determined not to be the one kicked out for failure. Her gaze sharpened as she watched the commander enter a high-class, members-only bar under heavy guard. The suspicious nature of the meeting confirmed her instincts that something illicit was happening behind those closed doors. The thought of Silva's approval sent a flush to her cheeks, and she giggled to herself while readying her recording equipment. If she could capture proof of this meeting, her big brother would surely be impressed by her success. Slipping into a seemingly deserted building to get a better vantage point, she noted the disarray of the interior. She whispered a firm instruction to her companion to keep watch at the door and ensure they weren't followed. Suddenly, the rotted floorboards gave way beneath her weight. A sharp cry of surprise escaped her lips as she lost her footing in the middle of the derelict room. With a violent crack, the wood splintered completely. She plummeted through the floor, debris and dust raining down around her as she fell into the darkness below. Heart hammering against her ribs, she peered out from the shadows of the lower level. The echoing crash of her fall felt deafening in the silence, and she prayed that no one had heard the commotion. Upstairs, the commotion drew the attention of nearby workers who rushed to investigate the source of the noise. They found only a pile of rubble and a hole in the floor, puzzled by the absence of whoever had caused the collapse. Having narrowly avoided detection by hiding in the shadows, she steadied her breathing and focused on the task at hand. It was time to find her target and finish the investigation, regardless of the obstacles in her path. She huddles in the darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs as she narrowly avoids detection by the workers above. Below her, Wilm Brown stands with his associates, his presence confirming her suspicions that something illicit is taking place. Determined to succeed, she steels her resolve, promising herself that she will bring back the evidence her brother needs to expose the truth. However, the distance makes it impossible to catch their words, and she grunts in frustration as the vital conversation remains just out of reach. Suddenly, the floor gives way with a deafening crack, sending her tumbling through a cloud of dust and debris into the room below. As the dust settles, the commander and his aide turn toward the commotion, their eyes landing directly on the intruder. Realizing the gravity of her situation, she panics, her mind racing for a way out as she silently pleads for help. Before she can move, she is seized and pinned against the cold stone, her muffled cries ignored by her captors. Wilm Brown looms over her, his face twisted in a snarl as he demands to know who is responsible for her presence. He roughly tilts her head back, his grip bruising as he bellows for an answer, refusing to believe she acted alone. He looms over the girl, dismissing her claims of acting alone. When he demands the device they found earlier, his eyes glint with a cruel curiosity. With a sharp crack, the commander crushes the small cylinder in his hand, ignoring her desperate plea that she had crafted the device herself. He scoffs at the notion, deeming such craftsmanship impossible for a mere villager. Turning to his men, the large man barks orders to prepare the room for a more intensive session. He mutters about her unexpected stubbornness, deciding that if words won't work, physical pain certainly will. A cold array of metal instruments sits ready on a nearby table, each tool designed for a specific, agonizing purpose. He selects a heavy, ridged implement, weighing it in his hand as he approaches the trembling girl. Her eyes widen in pure terror as the reality of her situation sinks in. The commander brings the cold metal close to her skin, savoring the way she flinches. He seems almost playful, suggesting they start their fun with this particular choice. Before beginning, he dismisses the guards, telling them to keep watch outside. He wants no witnesses to the brutality that is about to unfold. Now alone with his captive, the man's face contorts into a mask of sadistic glee. He offers her one last chance to spare herself the coming agony by revealing who sent her. Despite her tears and the overwhelming fear radiating from her small frame, she finds a final spark of defiance. She screams her refusal, vowing never to betray her secrets, which only serves to deepen the commander's dark scowl. Watching from the shadows, a young man sighs at the escalating violence. Realizing that the time for stealth has passed, he prepares to step in, noting that things have finally reached a point where he can no longer remain a bystander. He watches as the commander leans in, his voice dripping with malice. Wilm Brown admits that the truth is secondary to the pleasure he derives from the suffering of a naive girl, urging her to scream as much as she likes since no one outside can hear. As the torture begins, the girl's cries of agony fill the room, just as the commander intended. He revels in the sound, mocking her by claiming he can hear her perfectly. Despite the searing pain and the crushing weight of humiliation, Roma remains resolute in her silence. She clings to the hope that her big bro will eventually bring this man to justice, vowing not to let her tormentor have the satisfaction of a single word. In the depths of her suffering, a memory surfaces of a kinder time. A woman had once promised her that if she ever faced true hardship, there was a specific chant she should remember. The memory echoes with the assurance that these words would surely bring aid to her side in her moment of greatest need. Back in the cold reality of the dungeon, she begins to whisper the names of those she holds dear: Mia, Rofina, and Keel, turning their names into a desperate prayer. Her captor, however, is merely irritated by the unintelligible murmurs. Wilm Brown sneers at her stubbornness, wondering aloud how much longer she can possibly hold out before her spirit finally breaks. His arrogance is suddenly cut short by a jarring realization. A look of pure shock replaces his smug grin as something entirely unexpected begins to unfold before his eyes. A violent explosion suddenly rips through the chamber, sending the commander reeling backward amidst a shower of stone and dust. He shouts in confusion, his control over the situation vanishing in an instant. As the debris settles, his eyes widen in terror, the predator having suddenly become the prey in the wake of the mysterious intervention. He recoils in shock, his face contorted with confusion as he demands to know what is happening. Around him, his guards have been neutralized, slumped lifelessly on the cold stone floor. He stares in horror as thick plumes of smoke billow through the shattered entrance, obscuring the figure responsible for the sudden intrusion. The intruder emerges through the haze, offering a polite apology for the late-night disturbance, while Roma looks up with a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning hope. He stands tall, identifying himself as a member of the Holy Empire of Eternia's 3rd Special Operations Unit, causing the commander's arrogance to vanish instantly, replaced by a cold, paralyzing sweat. The warrior reveals his name as Silva, standing as a beacon of authority whose presence alone shifts the entire atmosphere of the dungeon from despair to impending judgment. He looked down with cold disdain, noting that even a pig would have more sense than the man trembling before him. He demanded that the commander look into his own reflection and accept the reality of his total defeat. Because of this refusal to yield, he began to explain the legal trap he had set. He clarified that while the right to subdue violent resistors usually belongs to the state, the one delivering a summons is temporarily granted the authority to make an arrest. In addition to this authority, he pointed out that within the confines of the mine, his own testimony would serve as absolute legal evidence. He advised the man to submit quietly to this authorized military investigation. He mocked the man's predictable tastes, mentioning his penchant for beautiful women and his specific interest in the red-haired girl. The commander reeled, his mind racing as he wondered how his secret basement and his very location had been discovered. Leaning in closer, he whispered that the commander surely wanted to savor his prize with his own hands, further unsettling the already broken man. In response to the desperate question of how he could possibly know so much, he offered a chilling smile. He claimed to know everything, having carried the knowledge since a previous life. Terrified by this impossible revelation, the commander began to scream for help, his voice cracking as he offered a massive reward to anyone who could kill the man standing before him. As the echoes of his desperate pleas filled the courtyard, he turned and fled, leaving his adversary standing perfectly still in the moonlight. Moments later, the fleeing man stopped, gasping for breath and lamenting his misfortune. He then heard the calm voice behind him explaining that all the guards had already been dealt with and were currently sleeping upstairs. The realization of his isolation hit him like a physical blow, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated terror as he looked back at the man who seemed to know his every move. He desperately tries to pivot, his voice cracking as he offers Silva a chance to join forces instead of continuing this confrontation. Desperate to save himself, the commander begins to ramble, warning that his downfall would cause chaos and promising that a simple commendation is all the knight would ever receive from the authorities. He goes as far as to offer everything from unfathomable wealth and status to any woman the young man might desire. But the knight remains unmoved, finally offering a cold, respectful decline. Silva explains that such grand promises of half the world are a cliché he has no interest in, dismissing the offer as something not even worth considering. This refusal sends the commander stumbling back, his bravado crumbling into a pathetic heap on the floor. Turning his attention away from the broken man, the knight calls out to Roma, whose eyes well with tears as she looks upon the man she considers her brother. Enraged by the dismissal, the commander snaps, lunging forward with a murderous roar and calling his opponent a stray dog. He is met with a brutal, bone-shattering strike that sends his head snapping back. Reeling from the impact, the man can barely choke out his opponent's name through the pain. A final, crushing blow is delivered straight to the commander's groin, silencing his protests once and for all. He lay broken on the stone floor, the weight of his defeat finally sinking in. Above him, the blonde knight and the young operative discussed the success of their infiltration. The girl, having shed her mask, reported that all the incriminating evidence and the secret passages leading to the basement had been secured. The commander's fall was a testament to the young woman's skill, and Silva Pierce didn't hesitate to offer his praise. He patted her head, commending her ability to accomplish anything she set her mind to. She beamed, dismissing the difficulty of the task with a casual remark about how easy it had been. Despite her success, she couldn't help but grumble about the nature of her first day on the job, lamenting the need to kick such a filthy person. Her focus quickly shifted to more practical matters as she tugged at the man's arm, pleading for a new pair of shoes to replace her soiled ones. He, however, seemed more concerned with the logistics of the force's supplies. While the others bickered, Natalya took charge of the prisoner. With a sharp kick to his side, she ordered the disgraced commander to get moving, showing no sympathy for the man who had once held such high authority. He was led away, a pathetic figure stripped of his dignity and his shirt. Silva watched the procession depart, a thoughtful expression on his face. He mused that if the other soldiers saw this unusual treatment, they might feel a twinge of jealousy, though he reminded himself that the man was still technically only a suspect and shouldn't be handled too roughly just yet. With the immediate threat neutralized and the prisoner secured, he turned his attention to the remaining loose ends. His gaze sharpened, signaling that the most delicate part of the evening's work was still ahead of him. He approached the young woman who had played her part in the ruse so convincingly. Roma was trembling, her eyes welling with tears as the adrenaline of the encounter faded. When he asked if she was all right, she could only manage a choked response, admitting that she was far from okay and had been truly terrified. Overwhelmed by the lingering fear, she suddenly lunged forward, burying her face in his chest. Her cries grew louder as she clung to him, the facade of the brave villager completely shattered by the reality of the danger she had faced. He stood stiffly for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the sudden display of emotion. Softening his stance, he placed a hand on her head in a comforting gesture, telling her to let it all out and cry as much as she needed to. Eventually, her sobs subsided into a quiet sniffle. Roma looked up at him, her expression a mix of relief and lingering resentment, accusing him of being cruel for planning her capture from the very beginning. He took the accusation in stride, simply asking if she had finally calmed down enough to talk. She listens as Silva acknowledges the truth of her accusations, his gaze drifting upward as he admits his role in the deception. He reflects on the cold calculation of his plan, recalling how he leveraged his knowledge of the world to ensure Roma would be captured, all to secure the evidence needed from the basement. Turning back to her with a heavy heart, the captain offers a sincere apology, admitting that he was the one in the wrong for betraying the trust of the person who believed in him most. The young woman remains conflicted, her expression a mix of hurt and longing as she explains that while she was happy to be relied upon, the reality of being used as bait has left her unable to feel truly joyful. Attempting to make amends in the only way he knows how, he offers her any amount of gold she desires, or even to fulfill any request she might have. Instead of riches, she leans in and whispers a strange request, pleading for him to call her his best underling. Though baffled, he eventually sighs and grants her wish, much to her delight. As they begin to walk away from the scene of the investigation, a quiet understanding settles between them. the tension of the previous moments beginning to thaw. He stops and speaks with a sudden, raw sincerity, telling her how truly grateful he is that their paths crossed that day, acknowledging that the mission's success would have been impossible without her. Her face lights up with a radiant, tearful smile, all her previous resentment vanishing as she calls him a hero and expresses her own gratitude for their meeting. Under the quiet night sky, the two figures stand together outside the grand estate. The bond between the knight and his unlikely companion forged anew in the aftermath of the storm. She had settled into her new role, and as the days passed, the intensity of the investigation into Wilm Brown finally began to subside. Silva sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of paperwork that demanded his attention. It had been 10 days since the inquiry began, and he found himself completely swamped, the quiet scratching of his pen the only rhythm in the room as he meticulously documented the events. While he was lost in his reports, a soft knock came from the door. He granted permission to enter, and Mia Hawkeye stepped into the room, her posture tense with a quiet anxiety. She spoke tentatively, apologizing for the interruption, but admitting that there was a pressing matter she felt compelled to discuss with him. Seeing her unease, he listened as she shared her growing dread regarding Kyle's whereabouts. She noted that while he was only expected to be gone for a few days, 10 full days had now elapsed without any word. As she questioned if he was truly all right, a sudden, sharp realization pierced through Silva's exhaustion, his eyes widening as a massive oversight dawned on him. The gravity of his error left him slumped in his seat, the image of a man defeated by his own negligence. With a heavy sigh, he could only offer a simple, blunt confession. In the chaos of the investigation, he had completely forgotten about the young man's